The story opens with Halden, an ordinary guy, stuck grinding away at a soul-draining office job. Waiting for a crowded train one evening, he was suddenly pulled into a fantasy world. Halden woke up inside a grand stone castle, before a king claiming he summoned heroes to save the realm. Halden was not alone, surrounded by roughly 10 other summoned strangers. Royal priests examined everyone's stats and skills, awarding one high schooler a rare combat ability, while the king celebrated. But Halden's turn left the clergy speechless. The priests informed the king that Halden possessed 0 skills, rendering him completely useless. The king explained that the realm was at war with demon forces and needed capable heroes to fight. Lacking any abilities, Halden realized he would only drag others down on the battlefield. Halden refused to return to his dull former routine, yet dying in combat sounded even worse. Learning there was no way back to Earth anyway, Halden proposed a deal. Halden requested a remote plot of land where he could settle down as a quiet farmer. Eager to discard an unpowered summon, the monarch readily agreed. The king even tricked Halden into buying the territory with the starter gold meant for new arrivals. Halden brushed it off, took basic tools, adopted a fitting fantasy name, and set off. Following a month on foot, Halden reached the realm's far frontier, an empty coastal expanse. The barren region was totally deserted. Yet Halden welcomed the freedom from bosses and taxes. Halden set out to transform this wasteland into a private paradise, though. There was a major secret the kingdom overlooked. Halden was far from powerless. Before landing in this world, Halden met a clumsy yet kind deity named Hephaestus in the void. Hephaestus explained that the resident skill goddess was biased, prompting him to step in personally. Hephaestus granted Halden a divine blessing called Supreme Bearer, hidden from church priests who only recognized standard mortal skills. Standing on, settled in the wilderness with cheap gear, Halden prepares to start fresh, unaware of his divine blessing's true reach. Halden quickly settled into a comfortable daily routine. Crops sprouted, shelter stood finished, and fresh water flowed after Supreme Bearer purified ocean water with a single touch. Turning his attention toward the nearby mountain, Halden ventured into the woods, carrying a capital-bought axe and bow. The moment Halden gripped the weapons, his blessing activated, granting instant mastery over both tools. Halden moves effortlessly through the dense forest, discovering a mountain teeming with wild game. Halden tracks animals easily, securing meat for his homestead without trouble. The hunting bow proves absurdly accurate, striking every single target dead center. Halden gathers edible herbs and berries along the trail, taking note of useful plants. Heading back toward the cabin, Halden spots an unexpected sight among the rocks. Clear mountain water bubbles naturally from a rocky spring, offering sweet, fresh water straight from the ground. This discovery changes everything, saving Halden from constantly purifying seawater by hand. Halden marks the spring's location, planning a trench or pipe network to route fresh water straight to his crops. Returning to camp, Halden cooks up his fresh harvest, along with mountain game, wild herbs, and dried seaweed, creating a simple yet delicious feast. Halden eats outdoors, watching rapid growing crops surround the single-day cabin, while the ocean sparkles in the distance, proving his new life is finally taking shape. Only a short time has passed since Halden arrived in this realm, yet shelter, food, fresh water, and salt are already fully secured. The Supreme Bearer blessing is absurdly overpowered. The divine gift produces impossible results, growing crops overnight and turning salt water pure with a single touch. Halden turns in that evening, already mapping out his next projects. Halden hopes to cultivate rice soon, wanting to offer traditional rice balls to Hephaestus. Halden needs to figure out textile weaving before his original capital clothes wear out completely. The mountain spring also promises to revolutionize his entire farming setup. One man, a divine blessing, and an unwanted stretch of wilderness are somehow building a paradise. Pause right there, drop a like and subscribe for more hidden manga recommendations, and drop a comment below. Tell us if you're enjoying the story, though most of you will probably scroll right past. Now let's jump back in. Halden surveyed his fields, noting that while the crops grew healthy, they still needed time to mature. Halden turned to Maurice, asking if her magic could speed up the harvest. Halden meant it as a casual question, but Maurice treated it as a serious challenge. Maurice set to work instantly, gathering glass flasks and alchemy tubes. Maurice carefully mixed strange ingredients together, thoroughly concentrated on her work. Finishing her brew, Maurice handed Halden a glass vial filled with glowing green liquid. Maurice called the potion a super growth elixir, instructing Halden to sprinkle a few drops onto the soil. Halden remained doubtful, but the moment the brew hit the soil, the sprouts shuddered. Right before Halden's eyes, stems shot upward, leaves unfurled, and bright red tomatoes alongside giant potatoes burst through the dirt. Within seconds, the barren patch turned into a rich harvest, leaving Halden stunned. Taking a mermaid master chemist as a wife was an absolute cheat code for survival. Pleased with the food, Halden still felt overwhelmed by how fast his peaceful life was shifting. Over their meal of fresh vegetables, Maurice revealed she had not fled her realm merely to hide. In truth, she held royal rank as a mermaid princess, but she despised the suffocating rules and monotonous life beneath the sea. Getting captured by Halden gave her the ideal excuse to abandon royal duty and live on land. Halden recognized that his quiet home now held more than just a roommate. Instead, he shared his space with a fiery princess, capable of solving any problem. Dangerous monsters still prowled the peaks, and threats lurked around every corner. Yet Maurice's bright presence transformed this desolate island into a true home. The pair spent the night designing cabin upgrades together, with Maurice offering to brew specialized potions ranging from pest repellent to potent plant food. Halden's simple life was gone, replaced by an unpredictable and thrilling dynamic. Realizing crops required careful nourishment just like any living creature, the hero asked Maurice if her alchemy could craft plant remedies. Maurice agreed with full confidence, explaining that optimal growth required fertilizer made from a monster fish called scorval. Plunging into the sea, she shifted into her mermaid form and returned an hour later, hauling a massive sea beast longer than a grown man. Though shaped like a giant herring, the creature possessed formidable magical strength. Slaying the beast with a swift magical strike, Maurice carved the carcass into heavy chunks. She dumped the meat into a massive cauldron, boiling the mixture while chanting spells. After reducing the broth and squeezing out every drop of fluid, Maurice used her magic to instantly dry and grind the remains into a fine powder. Spreading this enchanted fertilizer across the fields triggered an astonishing transformation. By daybreak, every crop on the farm had fully ripened at incredible speed. Maurice explained that the creature's dense mana had charged the mixture, making the fertilizer hundreds of times more potent than normal feed. For the first time, Halden felt genuine awe at his wife's extraordinary skills. Together, they spent the day harvesting mountain loads of produce, though Maurice had no farming experience. Halden used his unique bearer abilities to streamline the harvest, before sitting down to share a raw tomato. As an ocean-dwelling creature, Maurice had never encountered such fruit before. A single bite sent her into pure bliss from the explosive flavor. Halden realized his special gift produced crops far superior to standard medieval yields. Cooking up a simple vegetable stew with coarse salt, Halden delighted Maurice completely. Encouraged by this success, Halden planned to cultivate rare spices, fragrant herbs, and sugarcane next. Shared living soon raised a very practical problem: sanitation and waste. Halden had been relieving himself in the ocean, infuriating Maurice. Maurice scolded him sharply, explaining that land dwellers shouldn't pollute the sea. Resolving the issue, Maurice plunged into the tide to retrieve baby starfish, ravenous monster creatures that consumed organic waste. Demonstrating their power, she dripped fresh blood into a bucket of water. The starfish scrubbed the liquid until it ran crystal clear within seconds. Halden constructed a secluded outhouse around this starfish basin, greatly elevating their daily comfort. Shortly after, Maurice revealed she found a nearby dungeon, leaving Halden, a traveler from another world, confused by the concept. During their discussion, Halden confessed his past, explaining how a king summoned him before he abandoned that life. Maurice beamed with excitement upon learning her husband was a true hero, even if he chose a farmer's life. She guided Halden to a coastal cavern where heavy, oppressive air hung near the entrance. Maurice explained that dungeons form where magical energy or mana get trapped and warp space into another dimension. These concentrated energy hubs constantly spawned monsters within their depths. Curious and cautious, Halden prepared to inspect the cave, well aware that unchecked dungeons acted like ticking time bombs. Left uncleared, dungeon creatures would eventually overflow and ruin neighboring farms. With an active dungeon lurking right beside their new home, Halden and his mermaid bride set out to clear it together. Maurice commanded lethal combat potions, flinging mixtures that froze, shocked, or scorched enemies instantly. Watching her fight made Halden feel helpless, especially given his unique gift. The Supreme Bearer ability only granted mastery while holding the right tool. Luckily, Halden spotted a discarded sword on the ground. Gripping the hilt transformed Halden into a legendary sword saint, allowing him to slice through every monster in their path. At the bottom of the steps, the cavern gave way to refined stone architecture, signaling to Maurice that this was no ordinary cave. A place like this had a master, likely a dragon or a feared undead king. Right on cue, a heavy door swung open, revealing a withered, mummy-like figure dressed in aristocratic robes. Before them stood the king of the undead, widely considered the world's deadliest creature. Battle broke out immediately, but Halden overpowered the creature with effortless ease. As it turned out, the blade Halden had carried in belonged to the undead king himself. The sacred weapon possessed its own will and chose Halden as its rightful master. Recognizing true strength, the undead ruler yielded on the spot. Calling Halden a holy saint, the ancient monarch invited the couple inside for tea. The monarch, whom they nicknamed Sensei, proved remarkably easygoing. A high priest a millennium ago, he had turned undead to survive and simply outlived his original purpose. Sensei swore to keep his dungeon beasts in line so they wouldn't bother the farm. Maurice beamed at the news, knowing an organized dungeon meant an endless supply of valuable materials, meat, and fur. Before saying goodbye, Sensei handed them a rare block of monometal as a token of goodwill. Halden offered to return the holy blade, but Sensei held up a hand, insisting the divine sword belonged with the warrior it had chosen. Instead of a terrifying monster, they had gained a powerful, albeit lonely neighbor who welcomed the rare social visit. The holy sword proved far more practical than simple combat gear. It sliced through monometal like warm butter, simplifying both the boar hunts and the butchering process. Accepting his strange fortune, Halden focused on the work ahead. With the monometal Sensei provided, the forge stayed hot for a massive equipment overhaul. Out came new frying pans, saucepans, woks, stock pots, and sharp chef knives to replace the old kitchen gear. Monometal cookware outperformed the cheap iron tools from the capital in every way. Heat distributed evenly, food stopped scorching, and blades held sharper edges, while farm tools received the same upgrade. Hoes, shovels, handsaws, and hammers were all recast in superior monometal. Higher up the peak, the hunt for square boars yielded incredible results. 25 beasts were brought down and flash frozen by Maurice's specialized potions, then loaded onto a transport cart Maurice had arranged in advance. Her foresight impressed Halden, though he was getting used to her clever planning. Maurice rejoiced at securing land meat, a luxury completely unavailable under the sea. Having craved boar roast for months, her patience finally paid off, with 25 carcasses secured in cold storage and farming operations thriving. Upgraded implements, professional cookware, and an abundance of game lay all around them, along with an unmapped dungeon sitting right on their doorstep. Combining Halden's supreme bearer skill with the monometal hoe transformed their daily labor. A single stroke cleared an entire row in seconds, turning the homestead into an efficient paradise. Successful hunts left their pantry overflowing with rich horned boar meat. Maurice suggested constructing a fixed stone ice house kept frozen through her alchemy, creating a medieval walk-in freezer that left only one detail missing for the ideal feast. Crafting crispy pork cutlets required eggs, an ingredient the mermaid princess had never seen. Halden proposed searching the mountain dungeon for avian beasts. Though another dungeon master might pose a threat, they laughed off the danger, assuming lightning wouldn't strike twice, until a massive silver dragon named Sylvain swooped down. As guardian of the mountain dungeon, Sylvain was furious over the missing boars. Maurice froze in fear as the silver dragon unleashed a towering column of fire. Halden drew the holy sword without hesitation, splitting the flames cleanly to protect the land. Before combat escalated further, a familiar voice echoed across the clearing. Sensei arrived from the nearby cavern dungeon, stepping between the fighters. It turned out the silver dragon and the undead king shared a long history as rivals. Sensei admitted he had casually let slip who was hunting on the mountain. Turning to Sylvain, Sensei scolded her for obsessing over a few boars and challenging a holy saint carrying a sacred blade. Embarrassed and shaken, the dragon turned to make a hasty exit, but Halden grabbed Sylvain's tail, anchoring her with one hand. Rather than continuing the fight, Halden extended an invitation to lunch. Since the game originated on her peak, sharing the feast felt like fair play. Thinly sliced boar meat was seasoned with garlic, salt, and pepper, then seared to perfection, delivering a burst of flavor that stunned the ancient dragon. Sensei joined the meal as well, proving undead palates still appreciate fine cooking. Between Sylvain's enthusiastic roaring and Maurice begging for another serving, the farm was livelier than ever. Even with the teacher's praise, the farm was noisier than ever. It was hardly the quiet life Halden envisioned, but at least the food was a massive hit. Suddenly, the giant dragon began to glow and shrink in size. Within seconds, the massive beast vanished, leaving behind a striking young woman dressed in an elegant, expensive gown. Silver hair framed her face, matching the dragon's scales perfectly. This was Sylvain, using her dragon magic to take human form. The teacher, an undead king holding 1,000 years of wisdom, explained that powerful dragons often mimic humans just for entertainment or culture. Sylvain admitted she shifted because the steak was too delicious to swallow whole without tasting it properly. As it turns out, Sylvain is the daughter of the terrifyingly powerful Dragon Emperor. To prove herself herself worthy as his heir, she had been tasked with stealing the holy sword from the teacher. She had been stuck on the mountain for 50 years, losing to him repeatedly. Now that the blade belonged to Halden, she threatened to burn down the farm to claim it. Yet a light poke to her stuffed stomach made her surrender instantly. She challenged Halden to a duel for the weapon, but the fight lasted only 5 seconds. Halden won effortlessly, though every time Sylvain lost, she just ate more steak. Eventually, Halden warned her that if he died, the cooked meals would stop forever. That statement froze Sylvain in her tracks, convincing her not to slay her only chef. Halden attempted to hand over the holy sword, but the hilt clung to his hand like a suction cup. Unable to leave without it, Sylvain settled nearby as a friendly neighbor who visited for food. Maurice was delighted, since they gained permission to forage Sylvain's mountain in exchange for meals. During their conversation, Halden realized he needed eggs to create even richer recipes. Learning that eggs could unlock new flavors, Sylvain and Maurice grew thrilled. The two women joined forces and flew off together to hunt monster birds. While they searched the skies, Halden contemplated the future of his kitchen. He had secured sugar from cane and salt from the sea, but seasonings remained scarce. Missing vinegar, soy sauce, and miso, Halden decided his next major project would be growing soybeans. Harvesting soybeans would allow him to brew traditional sauces, which would transform his cooking and open the door to rich pork cutlet sauces. With dependable neighbors and fresh crops on the horizon, farm life was about to become far more flavorful as soybean planting began. Soybeans were the ultimate crop, forming the foundation for soy sauce and fermented miso. Cultivating wheat was equally crucial for fresh breadcrumbs and homemade beer. Securing the ingredients was only the first step, as crafting proper sauces demanded trial and error. Fortunately, Maurice possessed potion expertise that made the process far easier. Maurice was a mermaid who had moved in as Halden's wife after being caught during a fishing trip. Beautiful and capable, her mermaid magic accelerated crop growth from a year down to a week. Life remained peaceful until a party of male mermaids emerged on the beach. Leading them was Prince Kalen, who immediately commanded his warriors to hurl harpoons. A single sweep of Halden's holy sword generated a gale that blew the spears away. Kalen raged, accusing the surface dweller of kidnapping a mermaid princess. Before violence broke out, Sylvain descended in dragon form, terrifying the aquatic soldiers. Perched atop the dragon's head sat Maurice, who truly was a princess of the realm. Kalen was her older brother, and the heir to the undersea kingdom. Kalen tried to haul Maurice home under the guise of family concern, but she shut him down. She saw right through the scheme, knowing her father wanted her back for a political marriage. To make her position clear, Maurice pulled her husband forward, declaring that she had already given her heart and devotion to Halden. Her confession flew Kalen into a protective brotherly fury. But Sylvain's mighty dragon roar instantly put an end to any thoughts of fighting. After calming the crowd, Sylvain shifted into a cute human girl so as not to frighten the guests. Halden then extended an invitation for Kalen to talk things over at the homestead. A potion transformed Kalen's tail into legs, and wearing tight swim trunks, he followed along. At the estate, Kalen began mocking what he assumed was a shabby hut. His jaw dropped upon seeing massive, high-grade warehouses and a sprawling brewery nearby. Maurice boasted of Halden's building and farming skills, while Halden served snacks to ease tension. Though soybeans were the goal, a slight potion mix-up during planting yielded red azuki beans instead. Simmering those red beans with sugar, Halden prepared a warm bowl of sweet bean soup. Kalen took one bite, forgot his anger for a moment, and admitted the dish tasted delicious. Over the sweet dessert, the lingering tension quickly melted away. As the group finished the sweet red bean soup, Prince Kalen sat in complete disbelief. Kalen realized the man living beside his sister was no ordinary peasant. Seeing Halden command dragons and construct vast buildings, the prince mistook him for a legendary sage. Kalen gladly gave the couple his full blessing to live together. Halden realized that despite Maurice simply moving in, they were living as husband and wife. Still, Halden wanted to confirm she truly agreed to this life. That mattered even more after learning her true identity as a mermaid princess. Maurice grew tearful, insisting her life belonged to her alone, far beyond royal duty. Prince Kalen then revealed the true motive behind Maurice's escape. Maurice possessed rare alchemical genius, crafting potions unmatched in centuries. Her beauty, intellect, and royal blood made her the most coveted bride in the realm. Chaos erupted as human nobles and demon lords fought over her, indifferent to affection. Both factions sought her kingdom's power to break the stalemate in their war. This struggle threatened civil war, forcing her to protect her kingdom's neutrality. Renouncing her crown, Princess Maurice abandoned her heritage and fled to the surface world. Moved by her plight, Halden instantly pledged to marry her and shield her from harm. Satisfied, Kaelin returned to the ocean depths to inform their royal father. Before departing, the prince offered a crate of fresh vegetables as a farewell gift. Just as Maurice settled in with relief, Sylvain the dragon suddenly interjected. Standing in human form, Sylvain declared her intention to marry Halden as well. Her motive was straightforward. Marrying him guaranteed she would inherit his holy sword upon his death. Above all, the dragon craved a daily taste of his incredible cooking. Halden initially refused, but Sylvain burst into tears until he yielded, leaving him with 2 wives. Knowing his cramped cabin could never hold a growing family, Halden resolved to build a real estate. Raising such a massive structure single-handedly proved impossible. Maurice lacked physical strength, while Sylvain excelled at demolition rather than construction. Seeking counsel, Halden visited his mentor, the Undead King, simply known as Teacher. Teacher advised employing dungeon monsters, noting how orcs and goblins constantly spawned in his catacombs. As construct-like entities forged of mana, these creatures required neither sleep, food, nor coin. They obeyed until destruction, so Teacher assigned Halden 5 orcs and 5 goblins for labor. The strategy paid off immediately, as muscular orcs hauled timber from the mountain slopes. Meanwhile, nimble goblins managed the crops, handling weeding and harvest duties. Halden took pride in guiding them like a father, despite their lack of souls or emotions. With his new monster workforce operating around the clock, progress accelerated, bringing his dream of a grand estate closer to reality. Halden, Maurice, and Sylvain gradually adjusted to the rhythm of their new homestead. Previously, Halden viewed the monsters as mere disposable automatons built for labor. That perception shattered when one of the orcs unexpectedly spoke, requesting additional tasks. Moments later, a goblin voiced his desire to cultivate ripe tomatoes. Halden's unique divine trait held effects far beyond mastering craftsman tools. Through direct contact while instructing them in carpentry and farming, his magic sparked true souls and distinct personalities within them. An unprecedented phenomenon. Overjoyed by their awakening, Halden embraced them all with paternal pride. Empowered by newfound sentience, the monsters labored tirelessly alongside him to complete a grand mansion. Far more than a simple cabin, the estate featured classic wooden architecture, lined with traditional tatami mats. Savoring the fresh scent of woven rush, Halden sank onto the floor to unwind. Though Maurice and Sylvain found the unusual layout puzzling initially, resting on the soft matting quickly won them over. Channeling his powers, Halden mastered woodworking to blend architectural styles throughout the home. The layout included a spacious kitchen equipped for stone oven baking, multiple bedrooms, and an ingenious waste system utilizing voracious starfish to maintain hygiene. Even with a fragrant cypress bath pending completion, the mansion felt like a genuine sanctuary. Having achieved self-awareness, the monsters constructed neat row houses nearby to remain close to Halden. Sylvain, despite her status as an ancient dragon sovereign, chose to reside there permanently. To protect her former lair, the dragon created a magical duplicate to guard it, freeing her to haunt the kitchen for grilled meat. Meanwhile, deep within a forgotten abyss, an ancient legendary weapon stirred from its slumber. This was Drevast, a malevolent holy blade forged by a deity a millennium ago. Bound to battle her sister blades until a single sovereign weapon remained, Drevast had spent centuries sealed in darkness. She had previously manipulated a high priest into undead servitude to guard her resting place. She hoped a legendary hero would arrive to rescue her, but the dungeon guardian proved far too strong. After the guardian slaughtered every challenger who attempted a rescue, warriors simply stopped coming. Trapped in total darkness for centuries, Drevast grew desperate to escape her imprisonment. Without warning, the blade sensed an overwhelming presence entering the floor above. Drevast immediately recognized this human as the ultimate wielder she had awaited for ages. Determined not to lose her chance, the magic sword dragged herself across the stone floor, slithering through dungeon passages like a serpent toward the upper level. Catching sight of the unarmed man, Drevast braced herself with anticipation, believing this was the ideal moment to be claimed and begin her legend. Halden had enjoyed a quiet life on his estate, but the property was growing crowded. The former saint had just completed a grand mansion, an achievement that left his brother-in-law, Prince Kaelin, completely speechless. Kaelin, a merman prince wearing a skimpy swimsuit on land, arrived bearing major news. Halden's wife, the brilliant mermaid Princess Maurice, had been such a prize that human and demon nations nearly ignited a full war for her hand. By marrying Halden, a neutral outsider belonging to no realm, the merman kingdom preserved its neutrality, easing regional tensions. As Halden and Kalen sampled homemade miso paste, a terrified goblin named Grok sprinted inside. An unfamiliar warship had anchored on their coastline, unloading troops led by demonic commanders. Prince Kalen feared their hidden retreat had been exposed to enemies. Yet, Halden remained calm and strolled down toward the shoreline to investigate. Leading the invasion force was Astaria, a top commander among the Demon Lord's 4 heavenly kings. This high-ranking general normally relished intense combat, though this mission felt trivial. Her orders were simple: execute the saint who took the mermaid princess and capture Maurice. Astaria deployed 100 skeleton warriors, expecting effortless slaughter in this remote backwater. Stepping ashore, Astaria encountered just 10 farmhands, a small unit of orcs and goblins. The demon general mocked them openly, particularly when Grub, the lead orc, stepped forward to demand that the invaders state their names and purpose. Astaria dismissed the local monsters, but the battle ended before she could order an attack. Halden's goblins struck with lightning speed, while his orcs wielded axes forged from ultra-rare monometal. Within seconds, the 100 skeletal soldiers were shattered into dust and bone fragments. Overwhelmed by mere farm laborers, Astaria and her officers promptly yielded. Reaching the beach, Halden surveyed the destruction and felt a flick of pity for the defeated skeletons. Halden commended Grub's squad for defending the land, urging them to stay cautious, since losing any worker would break his heart, a statement that moved the monsters to pledge lifelong loyalty. Meanwhile, Halden's holy sword, currently serving as a kitchen knife and weed trimmer, was losing her mind. Named Drivost, the legendary cursed blade had spent a millennium searching for a worthy wielder. Drivist had viewed Halden as the ultimate champion, yet he used her to chop firewood and clear stone crossings. The blade attempted to corrupt Halden's spirit into a ruthless killer. Yet, Halden possessed such pure heart, or blind luck, that the demonic curse failed completely. Consequently, the fearsome weapon was reduced to functioning as a disgruntled farm tool. With the demon commander restrained and the estate secured, Halden weighed what to do with his noble prisoner, while resuming his simple farming and brewing tasks. Halden stood resting along the shore when sudden tension filled the air. 3 demon invaders remained bound in custody, including General Astaria. Astaria possessed striking beauty with dark skin and pointed ears, though she also served as one of the Demon Lord's 4 heavenly kings amid this massive misunderstanding. The demons believed they held rights to Maurice, unaware Halden's workforce had crushed their invasion. Fuming with rage, Astaria branded Halden a bride stealer and swore to unleash ogres and cyclopes upon his land. Before the demon commander could continue her threats, a sudden glacial chill swept across the beach. Halden's neighbor, the no-life king, a terrifying undead archmage, arrived casually to visit. Before the captives could comprehend that terrifying sight, dark clouds blocked the sun. Sylvain, a colossal ancient dragon loyal to Halden, slammed down onto the shore. Facing an undead monarch and a legendary dragon side by side proved overwhelming for the invaders. Astaria and her remaining officers collapsed unconscious from absolute dread, while their warship abandoned them and fled into open ocean. Maurice embraced Halden, apologizing for bringing external conflict to their home, but he dismissed her worry. Instead, Halden marveled as the No-Life King explained that proximity to his holy aura had mutated his monsters into elite apex variants. Upon regaining consciousness, Astaria found herself encircled by these mutated war beasts. Attempting to salvage her pride, she challenged Halden to single combat, prompting him to sigh and draw his sidearm. Recognizing the holy sword, a legendary blade missing for a millennium, Astaria instantly surrendered and bowed on the ground. Without her mount, Astaria had 0 chance of escape, so Sylvain the dragon flew her back toward the mainland. Sylvain dropped her straight into an active war zone, threatening to burn the demon capital if they ever bothered Halden again. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a girl named Tilda was struggling. Tilda was a high schooler, summoned as a hero with the goddess Scythe skill, allowing her to one-shot enemies. Even though the king treated Tilda like royalty, life was miserable. Hard rock-like food, bug-infested beds, and coarse sandpaper clothes made every day painful. Tilda recalled 10 other classmates brought into this world alongside her. One skillless classmate stood out, though Tilda assumed he was already dead. Tilda considered herself the strongest around until she saw Sylvain the dragon sweep across a battlefield. Pressure from Sylvain's presence was so heavy that thousands of soldiers couldn't even breathe. Tilda realized her instant kill skill wouldn't even scratch a beast like that. Then Tilda heard the dragon declare her loyalty to Saint Halden, a name that burned into her memory. Tilda couldn't fathom what master could command a dragon capable of wiping out armies with a single breath. Back at the farm, St. Halden felt only annoyance whenever locals addressed him as a saint. Halden was busy conferring with the No-Life King about something far more critical than world power: breakfast. Wanting fresh eggs to elevate his recipes, Halden sought a new food source. So, Halden asked his undead friend if any dungeon monsters in the region acted like chickens. Legendary status meant nothing to Halden. He simply wanted the steady egg supply for his kitchen. Hearing about Halden's saintly talents, the undead teacher decided to lend a hand. Meanwhile, Maurice and Sylvain scoured the mountain peaks searching for egg-laying monsters. The teacher discovered exactly what they needed inside his own cavern dungeon: a bird called the Yashima. Looking just like a chicken, the Yashima had one odd detail: a bright red rooster comb. Usually only male birds have combs, and a male couldn't supply eggs for the settlement. But the Yashima surprised everyone, turning around and laying a light brown egg right on the spot. In this world, dungeon monsters don't reproduce naturally, so dungeon creatures lack fixed genders and can display traits of both sexes. Securing the Yashima was a total victory, guaranteeing a steady supply of eggs. The bird even showcased a fiery personality by kickstarting the meal. With a quick flick of its sharp claw, the bird cleanly cracked the egg into a bowl. A rich orange yolk emerged, offering incredible flavor. 5 of these Yashima birds were immediately moved into the farm. Returning home exhausted, Maurice and Sylvain grew annoyed at spending days searching the wrong mountains. The two ladies bickered like old companions, though Halden withheld scrambled eggs until they settled down. With food and housing sorted, attention shifted to the next major problem: clothing. Their original garments were falling apart, and Maurice faced a major dilemma. As a former mermaid, Maurice suffered from a total lack of pants. Since Maurice now spent her days on land in human form, Maurice was forced to wear her husband's oversized trousers. Halden stepped in using Supreme Bearer, a divine craft blessing from Hephaestus. A set of simple cotton clothes was quickly tailored for everyone, including the orc workers. While the orcs celebrated looking like civilized villagers, Maurice remained unimpressed. The new garments were functional, but they lacked any real sense of style. It turned out the Supreme Bearer blessing granted crafting speed, not fashion taste. Asking Prince Kalen didn't help either, since merfolk don't even wear pants in their underwater kingdom. During his visit, Prince Kalen suggested a way for the farm to make some money. Impressed by the food and high-grade metal tools, Kalen offered to buy surplus crops. Kalen noted that their everyday chore tools were forged from mana metal, which is worth more than pure gold. Halden and Kalen agreed on a secret trade deal, starting with pickled radishes that became a huge hit. Just as farm life settled into a routine, Astaria, the demon commander who had previously attacked them, reappeared. Astaria wasn't there to fight, arriving with 2 loyal aides and looking completely defeated. Following her failed siege and the chaos caused by Sylvain, Astaria was fired from the Demon Lord's army and stripped of her rank. Political rivals used her defeat to oust Astaria while the Demon King was away. Feeling partly responsible for her downfall, Halden decided to let Astaria stay. Despite Sylvain's objections, the settlement opened its doors and gave the former enemy a home. Halden believed in the old saying that even a hunter won't kill a bird seeking shelter in his coat. Halden agreed to let Astaria and her 2 followers stay, but under strict rules. No violence, everyone works for food, and Halden's word is law. Astaria, a former general who once tried to kill them, now joined the village. Astaria is now so broken and desperate that she bows until her forehead touches the dirt. Her 2 lieutenants, Para and Solveig, worry so much that they offer to do anything, even volunteering for night duties to keep her safe. Halden shuts that down immediately, clarifying that obedience only means following house rules. While the newcomers settle in, Halden learns more about the world around him. He discovers that humans, demons, and mermaids were created by different gods, but otherwise remain quite similar, having fought for millennia over their origins. Maurice apologizes to Halden for all the trouble she caused recently, though Halden welcomes the excitement before life settles back into a routine. Excellent warriors that they are, Astaria and her crew hunt for meat inside the dungeons, while Maurice brews potions and goblins tend the farm. A massive, muscular man arrives one morning. Unlike previous visitors, this man acts remarkably polite and shows no hostility. Introducing himself as Zarek the Demon King, he comes in humility rather than conquest. Zarek explains that his title is merely a heavy burden he recently inherited. Hearing rumors that Halden commands dragons and a legendary evil sword, Zarek views him as the world's greatest threat. Zarek challenges Halden to a duel, wagering his holy sword of wrath against Halden's weapon. Before tensions escalate, Astaria returns from hunting and gasps at the sight of her king. Longtime childhood friends Zarek and Astaria share a deep love for each other. Zarek searched relentlessly for Astaria after political schemes ousted her from the demon army. Rival demon nobles framed Astaria to block her marriage to Zarek and stop her rise. Zarek intended to win Halden's sword and present it to Astaria. Armed with a legendary holy sword, she would force the demon senate to restore her rank. Prepared to die trying, Zarek refused to imagine living without Astaria. Sympathizing with the couple, Halden hands over the sword to avoid bloodshed, but the cursed blade refuses. It clings tightly to Halden's palm, proving that discarding it won't be simple. Halden inspects the broken holy sword in his hand, a blade that once belonged to Astaria. Centuries ago, a demon king shattered the weapon, leaving Astaria's house trapped in low rank as a symbol of defeat. Zarek wants to repair the blade so Astaria can reclaim her status and stand beside him. Resolving to help, Halden aims not just to repair the sword, but to fully restore its soul. Heading into his forge, Halden shapes monometal, solidified pure energy with assistance. Harnessing the dragon Sylvain's fiery breath, Halden labors for 3 full days. Once finished, the restored sword gleams brand new and radiates unmatched power. Disbelief strikes the crowd as Astaria and Zarek marvel at the restored holy sword. Overjoyed, Zarek embraces Astaria, declaring her family strong enough to rule alongside him. Zarek proposes on the spot, and Astaria accepts without hesitation. However, Halden's wife Maurice cuts through the romance with harsh reality. Maurice points out the chaotic state of Demon Kingdom politics. Traitors plotted behind Zarek's back against Astaria, and even tried forcing Maurice into concubinage. Delaying the wedding gives their enemies time to sabotage the union. Maurice proposes an immediate wedding to seal the marriage before opponents can object. Securing a legally binding ceremony requires a high-ranking official witness. They turn to their teacher, the powerful undead sorcerer known as the No-Life King. Before his death, the No-Life King served as a high priest. Though human, while demons worship the underworld god Hades, the teacher commands a ritual capable of reaching the underworld. As the undead master prays, darkness smothers the sky, and heavy pressure fills the air. Overpowering the spell, he accidentally summons Hades, god of the underworld himself. Terrified onlookers watch Zarek step forward to request a marriage blessing, and Hades proves remarkably agreeable. Respecting Zarek's devotion to a single wife, Hades grants the couple a divine blessing. The divine mark grants vitality and punishes anyone who tries to sunder them before the god vanishes. Now officially the demon queen, Astaria sheds tears of joy and thanks Halden. Zarek prepares to march back to the capital to purge the conspirators. Just as peace seems restored, Astaria drops a bombshell by refusing to leave. Astaria insists on staying at Halden's home a while longer. Zarek and Astaria agree to remain at the farm for the time being. Feeling unready, Astaria seeks to train under Halden's guidance to grow worthy of her crown. Zarek approves, noting that a dragon's sudden appearance on the battlefield forced a ceasefire and granted him free time. Halden consents quickly, recognizing the newlyweds need sanctuary from political turmoil. Workers construct a separate cottage away from the main house to afford the newlyweds privacy. Zarek rolled up his sleeves and helped build, swinging a hammer like a seasoned carpenter. With the demon lord joining the local laborers, they finished the house in record time. The couple's shared passion seemed to drive the construction forward at double speed. While Zarek handled the heavy lifting, Astaria began learning the basics of cooking. Cooks in this realm rarely used herbs or spices, relying almost entirely on coarse salt to preserve meat. That lack of flavor explained why everyone who tasted Halden's seasoned dishes completely lost their minds. When Halden tried to teach his other companions how to prepare meals, the women just laughed, insisting they would rather let him feed them forever. Though nearby, the Holy Swords had their own drama brewing. The Holy Sword Javast had waited 1,000 long years to prove she was the supreme weapon. Suddenly, a massive rival blade named Halvorn confronted her. Halvorn struck terror into others after spending a millennium hunting down 4 sacred blades, shattering them and absorbing their power. Possessing 4 times the strength of a normal divine weapon, Halvorn intended to make Dryvost his next victim. Halden, however, noticed the shattered remnants of a blade Halvorn had previously destroyed. Shocking everyone present, Halden gathered the broken fragments and reforged the dead weapon, resurrecting her under the name X-Waste. Infused with Halden's divine skills, X-Waste awakened twice as powerful as Halvorn, her fiery personality completely transformed. Rather than seeking endless battle, the newly reborn blade desired only to foster peace and happiness. X-Waste promptly bullied the terrified Halvorn into a magical marriage, forcing him to abandon violence and protect their masters together. Drivist watched from the side in envy, sulking over why Halden had not granted her a power upgrade of her own. Far away in the Demon Kingdom, a high-ranking official named Lavelle pulled the strings from the shadows. Lavelle was an arrogant researcher who considered herself superior to everyone around her. Her grand ambition involved marrying her own daughter off to Zarek to secure absolute influence. Because Zarek remained devoted solely to Astaria, Lavelle attempted to arrange a marriage between the Demon Lord and a mermaid princess. She reasoned that once the Demon Lord accepted multiple wives, her daughter could easily claim a spot in his harem. When the mermaid princess wed Halden instead, Lavelle quickly pivoted her strategy. Lavelle tricked Astaria into accepting a suicide mission, guaranteed to end in ruin, using that manufactured failure as a pretext to strip Astaria of rank and banish her from the army. She believed the obstacle to her daughter's political marriage had vanished, but her scheme soon hit a wall. Zarek returned from the front lines far earlier than anyone anticipated. As head of the 4 Heavenly Kings, Lavelle fell into a complete panic over his return. Upon discovering Astaria's exile, Zarek flew into a rage and vanished from the capital to search for her. With their ruler gone, the demon army fell into chaos, while the fragile peace treaty with humanity teetered on collapse. Lavelle knew the demon realm would collapse within a month if full-scale warfare broke out anew. Compounding the crisis, another Heavenly King began plotting a civil war to seize the throne. Realizing her schemes had backfired, Lavelle prayed Zarek would return before the kingdom fell. Just as her trusted lieutenant approached her, this youth, the son of a fallen comrade whom Lavelle had raised as her own, delivered a shock. He loved Lavelle's daughter, and the young woman was so devoted to him that she threatened to end her life if they were denied marriage. Lavelle, famous for her calculating ambition, realized she had been blind to the genuine love right in front of her. She readily gave the young couple her blessing, eager to welcome her ward as a true son-in-law. Meanwhile, at the rural settlement, Zarek and Astaria adjusted smoothly to life among the commoners. Despite their royal heritage, both demon leaders threw themselves into daily chores without complaint. Zarek found genuine satisfaction in tiling fields and constructing kilns, savoring the honest physical effort. Astaria spent her days hunting game, tending crops, and experimenting with local herbs in the kitchen. Though they intended to reclaim their leadership eventually, the pair embraced the tranquility of their rustic routine. During rest hours, Zarek and Astaria studied under the settlement's teacher, an undead, no-life king with encyclopedic knowledge. Halden attended the lectures as well, though mastering magical theory proved a struggle for him. The scholar outlined 3 distinct traditions: versatile demon magic, specialized human sorcery for hero summoning, and mermaid potion crafting. Zarek added that they had located this hidden refuge using demon clairvoyance, an ability beyond human reach, which reassured Halden about their safety, while the rest of the group settled into their respective roles. Pera, a former lieutenant under Astaria, mentioned that her family had once owned a tailoring shop. Hoping to design stylish garments, Pera asked Halden for permission to oversee clothing production for the settlement. Halden welcomed the idea, having recently harvested premium silk from dungeon silkworms that the locals had ignored. He handed over the raw silk, granting Pera complete authority to establish her tailoring workshop. Pera threw herself into the assignment with intense dedication, perhaps a bit too intensely. Passing by the main hall, Halden overheard Pera shouting commands to the gathered women inside. The seamstress insisted that crafting flawless garments required precise physical measurements of every person present. From behind the door, Halden listened in disbelief as Pera ordered every woman to strip naked for exact fitting. Though Halden knew he ought to step away, curiosity held him rooted to the spot outside the door. He chuckled, realizing village life was growing livelier by the day. While inside, Maurice flushed with deep embarrassment. The mermaid princess suddenly recalled her very first encounter with Halden, when she had appeared half-naked, completely ignorant of human dressing customs. Behind a sliding door, a girl yelled in distress over her past blunders, while her friend Pera stayed busy teasing the others. Raised by a shopkeeper, Pera carried a total obsession with body measurements. Pera taunted the demon commander Astaria, claiming marriage had made her soft and heavy. Astaria denied it, but Pera tricked the entire group into undressing for a fitting. St. Halden overheard the entire conversation from right outside the room. Fabric rustled as the women traded comments on each other's figures. Astaria had not gained weight at all, merely growing fuller curves after her wedding. The dragon girl Sylvain joined in, boasting that her magic gave her a flawless human form. Yet when Sylvain showed off, the others laughed and called her a flat-chested child, crushing her pride instantly. Halden slipped away before anyone caught him listening. With the women occupied, Halden gathered Zarek, the orcs, and the goblins for entertainment. Halden introduced sumo wrestling, a simple sport requiring no gear. Chief Grub and his monster tribe grew overly competitive right away. The creatures tried dragging battle axes and spells into the ring, forcing Halden to lay down strict rules against weapons, magic, and striking, forbid any lethal moves, and step up to challenge Grub himself. Though Grub towered over him, Halden's supreme skill let him master any technique instantly. Halden ducked a heavy palm strike and hurled the massive orc clean out of the circle. Fired up by the display, the monsters launched a tournament where Zarek dominated every match, down to the last 3 contenders. Prince Kalen of the Mermen arrived on a visit and got hauled straight into the final rounds, winning the championship thanks to core muscle built from swimming the deep ocean. Later that afternoon, Para unveiled her first creation, an elegant blue skirt for Maurice. Para had woven the garment using thread from the monster silkworms Halden raised. Maurice beamed with joy, feeling genuinely fashionable for the first time on the farm. Growing suspicious, Sylvain blasted a fiery blaze straight at the new dress, shocking the onlookers. The flame bounced off harmlessly, leaving the delicate fabric untorn and uncharred. Halden's careful tending had mutated the silkworms during their growth, producing a diamond silk far stronger than steel and impervious to spells. Para pouted over her high fashion being viewed as combat gear, though Halden simply felt glad Maurice possessed fine clothes. Sylvain sulked in isolation, needing no armor in her naturally invincible form, so Halden patted her head to lift her spirits before night fell. Relaxing together later, Halden asked how Zarek reached the island without a ship, learning he used teleportation. Such spells normally restrict travel to locations the caster has previously set foot upon, yet precise coordinate markers allow a sorcerer to jump anywhere instantly. Zarek's chief spy, Solveig, had marked the island's location beforehand, while his own banished general had provided the exact spatial codes. This allowed Zarek to cross the realm and reunite with his wife, Astaria. Zarek explained that Sylvain's dragon magic kept the valley hidden from demon scry. Sylvain had erected a vast barrier to shield Halden's peace, though the respite was ending. Zarek prepared to march home and crush the rebels threatening his throne. Clad like a true sovereign in Para's diamond silk gown, Astaria departed at Zarek's side. They left Solveig behind to guard the portal, keeping a path open to the farm. Chaos gripped the demon city, where a fiery general named Vashka schemed for control out of jealousy toward Astaria. Upon Zarek's return, Vashka challenged Astaria to single combat, failing miserably. Astaria's gown of diamond silk repelled every spell Vashka hurled. Vashka's legendary blade snapped in two the moment it struck Astaria's enchanted weapon. Stripped of hope and realizing Zarek loved only his wife, Vashka collapsed in tears, weeping that she wanted to be Zarek's bride as well. Meanwhile, in the human capital, King Genesis 18 threw an arrogant tantrum. Genesis held that humanity was supreme, and all other races belonged in chains. The king fumed over a dragon interrupting his grand crusade against the demons. Learning the beast served Saint Halden, Genesis resolves to capture the holy man and force him to win the war, yet refused to spend funds on a proper expedition. Genesis dispatched an 8-person squad, including the hero Tilda, to hunt Halden down. While nations squabbled over land and crowns, Halden remained focused on his true passion back at the farm, baking bread. With golden wheat harvesting smoothly and a stone oven built, fresh bread swept the village. Freshly baked bread lifted everyone's spirits. But harsh reality quickly set in. Rapid growth left the settlement desperately short-handed, with home construction and farming piling up alongside. Exhaustion took over as workers struggled to dig a long canal bringing fresh water to the rice paddies. Princess Maurice felt the pressure more than anyone in the settlement. Single-handedly, the mermaid genius managed both medicine production and complex fermentation work. Between crafting miso, soy sauce, and pickles, Maurice also had to maintain fertilizer supplies. Reaching her limit, she demanded assistance, specifically merfolk trained in magical chemistry. When Prince Kalen, now obsessed with sumo wrestling, stopped by, the settlement asked for his assistance. Grim news followed, since ordinary mermaids viewed the dry surface as a terrifying wasteland. Until Maurice developed her transformation potion, stepping onto dry land remained lethal or permanent. Ocean society considered exile to the surface a severe punishment, second only to execution. Kalen pointed out that no sane, skilled mermaid would ever choose to abandon the sea. Moving ashore felt as insane as a human choosing to live at the bottom of the ocean. Still, the prince proposed an unconventional solution. Seeking individuals possessing advanced magical expertise and chemical mastery, led to an obvious group, because skilled mages with those talents usually face charges for illegal potion making or dangerous magic. Gathering qualified workers meant turning to convicted criminals, specifically prisoners already sentenced to banishment from the Sea Kingdom. Rather than marooning them on desolate beaches, the settlement could recruit them directly. Banishment offered a perfect trade-off, clearing the Mermaid Kingdom of dangerous outlaws, while supplying the outpost with master alchemists for their expanding agriculture. Securing these exile recruits set the stage for an intense new chapter in building their domain. Kaelin and Maurice finalized the logistics of transporting the exiled prisoners. Though Kaelin hesitated to turn a saint's refuge into a convict colony, Maurice dismissed his concerns. Outlaws actually suited her better, since rogue alchemists brought superior skill and relentless drive. Maurice requested 3 of the most dangerous and capable inmates in royal custody. First came Neva, the frozen witch, a brilliant scholar serving 2 years of a 500-year sentence in solitary confinement. Resentment consumed Neva after undersea authorities rejected her research into manipulation of ocean energy. When Prince Kaelin offered to slash her sentence to 10 years under a new penal agreement, the Ice Witch agreed immediately without even asking for details. Any labor on land beat decaying in a dark prison cell. Next came Syndra, the Witch of Hellfire, alongside Rovina, the Witch of Plague, who joined Neva as 3 of the 6 notorious mad witches feared throughout the ocean depths. Syndra had served as a royal soldier before her arrest for brutally beating a corrupt nobleman. Rovina, a quiet healer, ended up jailed for her radical theories regarding tiny, invisible organisms spreading disease. Guards brought the 3 captives ashore and administered a specialized potion. Crafting this master potion allowed Maurice to alter their biology into permanent land dwellers. Losing their ability to breathe underwater sealed the surface as their permanent home. Venturing inland, the newcomers froze in disbelief at the sight of Para, a demon woman. Shock grew as they watched orcs and goblins farming side by side in complete peace. Reaching the central manor, Princess Maurice stepped out to welcome the arrival of her new crew. As a former guard, Syndra felt eager to serve her royal mistress once again. Neva watched cautiously, suspecting Maurice, known as the feared Crown Witch, harbored dark plans to eradicate humanity. Dismissing thoughts of global conquest, Maurice laughed and called world domination far too exhausting. Instead, she escorted the trio into a workshop rich with familiar, comforting aromas. Reassuring them, Maurice explained their forced labor had nothing to do with warfare or destruction. Their new duties involved preparing specialized rations, snacks, and rich seasonings. Just like that, the sea's 3 most terrifying witches became kitchen staff for the princess. Maurice reminded her new recruits that basic salt was hardly the only way to enhance food. Presenting a rich, dark liquid, she introduced the 3 mermaid mages to soy sauce. Tasting the dark sauce astounded Neva and Syndra, while Rovina found herself captivated by the intricate science behind its creation. Credit belonged elsewhere, Maurice admitted, having recreated the sauce using magic and her husband's concepts. Maurice turned to Rovina directly, recognizing that her theories about microscopic organisms perfectly described the beneficial bacteria and fermentation process needed to craft the sauce. Overjoyed to see her life's work validated, Rovina nearly drank the concentrated, deadly liquid straight. As Maurice organized her new staff, Kaelin briefed the husband on the 6 witches, leaving him amused by their dramatic titles. These outcast women were actually elite scholars and warriors whose extreme magic had alarmed high society. Authorities had locked Neva away for proposing a radical spell to trigger a global ice age against her enemies. Syndra, once an elite royal guard, landed in prison after pummeling a high-ranking noble who insulted Princess Maurice. People branded Rovina a lunatic for attempting to save lives by injecting patients with recovered blood. It was an early form of medical science the Mermaid Kingdom rejected, prompting Prince Kaelin to warn others of their danger. Kaelin added that Princess Maurice led the group, standing as the most famous witch among them. Huddling near the brewery, the 3 newcomers felt like captives sent to a demon labor camp. Seeing orcs and goblins working the fields, they assumed Maurice was forced into a political marriage with a terrifying demon lord. The witches pitied the princess, viewing her as a helpless victim of a cruel fate. Overhearing their quiet chatter, Halden stepped up and offered to give them a tour. Confused by his human appearance, the women agreed to follow along. They hoped to gather intel on the local saint before facing him directly. The girls even begged Halden to keep their snooping secret from his master. Unbeknownst to them, They were talking directly to the master himself. Maurice arrived and caught them mid-scheme, though she remained completely relaxed. Laughing off their confusion, the princess corrected their misunderstanding about this being demon territory. The settlement was a sovereign realm belonging to her husband, Halden. The recruits worried how such a modest domain could defend against human or demon armies. Maurice pointed out that their monster workforce was actually made of exceptionally strong mutants. Just as the women tried to process this revelation, a massive dragon landed directly before them. The beast called out to Halden, proving this frontier outpost possessed formidable power. Terror froze the newcomers in place at the sight of the giant dragon. Rovina collapsed onto the ground, fainting instantly. The creature was Sylvain, the hero's dragon wife, returning from a flight to look for food. Princess Maurice stepped forward to reassure the panicked group. She calmly explained that Sylvain behaved much like a household pet. Despite her immense power, Sylvain acted more like a moody house cat. She ignored everyone when aloof, but demanded attention whenever she wanted to play. Learning that Halden commanded dragons terrified both Neva and Syndra. Panic mounted further when another visitor arrived, the No-Life King. The legendary undead monarch radiated an aura so chilling that the girls fainted a second time. To Halden, these legendary figures were merely neighbors visiting for a welcome party. To the witches, it felt like meeting twin apocalyptic disasters, though a grand feast began once everyone awoke. Neva, Syndra, and Rowena were astonished by the exquisite taste of every dish. They praised Maurice for the seasoning, unaware that Halden had prepared the food himself. Prince Kalen joined the lively feast with drinks, and official work began the following morning. Maurice took charge of training the 3 recruits in crafting medicine and fermented goods. Halden and the local residents gathered around to watch the lesson. Most spectators were eager to see what these new additions could do. Far from novices, these women were renowned as powerful witches back in the Mermaid Kingdom. Though exiled as convicted criminals through a plea bargain, their technical skills were genuine. Syndra served as a former royal guard, maintaining absolute loyalty to Princess Maurice. Ravina was a brilliant researcher obsessed with bacteria, overjoyed to find her theories proven correct here. Neva maintained a tough, rebellious front, hiding a massive crush on Prince Kalen. Maurice teased the girl by forcing her to practice romantic confessions instead of working. The princess knew Neva would labor relentlessly, just to stay near the prince. That evening, the 3 recruits talked inside their assigned quarters. Astonishment filled them over the settlement's luxury, from high-grade silk sleepwear to fine bedding. The mattresses surpassed the royal palace in softness, forcing them to rethink their view of Halden. Though initially mistaking Halden for a servant, they realized he was an otherworldly summoner of vast knowledge. Rovina felt happiest because Halden understood her science, while Syndra remained focused on serving Maurice. Syndra stood ready to settle here permanently in service to the princess. Neva tried to feign indifference, though her companions teased her about becoming Prince Kalen's bride. Despite technically undergoing penal servitude, all 3 recognized this domain was an absolute paradise. With the trio assisting her, Maurice finally gained the support required to manage her massive workload. Daily life across the entire settlement ran much smoother for everyone. As farm operations expanded, Maurice stepped into an administrative role to manage schedules and keep things organized. Her transition left a brewery vacancy, which Neva stepped in to manage. Although Neva presented a grumpy, delinquent exterior, she managed tasks with the strict diligence of a class president. Neva also harbored a secret crush on Prince Kalen, trying desperately to hide her feelings. Syndra and Rowena quickly began making major contributions of their own. Syndra, the former royal guard known as the Witch of Hellfire, worked hard but grew overly aggressive during hunts. She routinely unleashed fire potions, turning terrifying monsters into piles of ash, which renders them practically useless for gathering raw resources. Meanwhile, Rowena the Plague Witch obsessively researched microscopic life. Spending an entire day interrogating the locals about fermentation, she set out to distill the village's very first batch of liquor. Construction expanded rapidly across irrigation channels, paddy fields, pottery kilns, driving the labor force up to 100 monsters. Their instructor, an immortal ruler from a neighboring dungeon, supplied 90 additional orcs and goblins. Maintaining strict discipline required promoting veteran monsters like Grub and Grok into squad leaders. Remarkably, simply living inside the territory caused these new recruits to evolve into stronger forms. Senior officers mutated further into legatus orcs and formidable goblins, warriors capable of slaying legendary heroes single-handedly. Powered by this massive workforce, the entire domain underwent a total transformation. Workers erected a dedicated brewery where Rovina could experiment with ale while Neva took charge of the winery, crafting specialty pickles to win over Prince Kalen, Masons completed a functional kiln, replacing leaves and wooden boards with genuine ceramic tableware. Crucially, laborers finished an aqueduct that supplied sufficient fresh water to launch rice farming. Organizers planned a grand celebration to mark the initial planting day. What began as a friendly community gathering instantly escalated into a fierce rivalry among the women. Maurice and the dragon Sylvain clashed over who deserved the title of primary wife, drawing others into the contest. Even Neva entered with intense focus after securing the promise of a date with Prince Kalen. Competitors lined up in the muddy paddies as the planting race commenced, transforming routine farm work into a fierce battle for dominance. Soon, the rice planting tournament dissolved into utter chaos. Sylvain deployed high-tier magic to plant seedlings at blinding speed, while Maurice relied on her innate mermaid power to keep pace. The match seemed close until Sylvain lost patience, as dragons possess little restraint and, unable to secure an instant victory, the dragon contemplated unleashing her fiery breath to incinerate the field. Seeing an opening, a muscular guard named Syndra tackled Sylvain from behind, but the dragon's reinforced scales proved so dense that Syndra bounced straight off and was disqualified. Taking advantage of Sylvain's distraction, Maurice teamed up with Para and Solveig to overpower her. Unfortunately, the trio sank into deep mud and ended up clinging to Sylvain just to remain upright. Outraged, Sylvain threatened to assume her full dragon form to throw them off. Halden the Saint warned that destroying the crop would cost Sylvain 3 days of meals. Ultimately, the frontrunners became hopelessly entangled and dropped out, leaving Neva, a quiet, diligent worker, to claim victory simply by staying focused. Once planting concluded, Demon Lord Zarek arrived alongside his new queen, Astaria. Accompanying them was Vashka, a towering, heavily muscled, and fierce warrior who served as one of the 4 heavenly generals. Vashka had staged a rebellion during Zarek's absence, driven not by ambition for the throne, but by sheer jealousy. Having harbored feelings for Zarek for years, Vashka could not accept his marriage to Astaria. The general staged a dramatic scene, demanding Zarek take her as a wife or execute her on the spot. Unwilling to execute such a capable warrior, Demon Lord Zarek proposed taking Vashka as a concubine to maintain stability. Queen Astaria accepted the arrangement with poise and composure. Astaria recognized that a sovereign must take multiple spouses to satisfy rival factions. Yet a new complication emerged that threatened to dismantle this simple solution. Violent arguments continuously broke out between Demon Lord Zarek and General Vashka. Vashka remained a headstrong, combat-obsessed general, deeply attached to her ruler. Vashka resented that Zarek had elevated Astaria while leaving her behind. Zarek's mentor, an ancient undead king, revealed the underlying problem. Zarek had accepted a unique marriage rite from Hades, Lord of the Underworld. Unlike other deities who broke their vows, Hades remained famously devoted to a single partner. Consequently, his divine right strictly prohibited taking multiple wives, creating a massive obstacle for a monarch expected to forge political alliances with diverse demon clans through marriage. Regretful, Demon Lord Zarek admitted he had overlooked how monogamy impacted his political duties and Vashka's devotion. To resolve the dilemma, the undead mentor casually summoned Hades back to the mortal realm. Hades expressed irritation over being asked to break a sacred rite so quickly. Soon his consort, the Earth Mother Demeter Sephone, arrived at his side. Considerably more relaxed, Demeter Sephone teased Hades about his rigid nature. The goddess noticed Halden, a visitor from another world who possessed an ultimate crafting gift. Demeter Sephone recognized that Halden had restored Astaria's legendary holy sword, elevating it beyond divine weapon. Hades revealed he had originally forged 7 holy blades for demon kind to battle humans who, sent down by the sky god Zeus to conquer the earth. The grand design forced the holy blades to destroy one another until a single supreme weapon remained to eradicate mankind. But Halden shattered that divine order when his legendary crafting skill restored Astaria's blade. The demon secured an ultimate weapon without sacrificing the rest. Sensing an opportunity, the goddess offered a deal. Repair Vashka's shattered blade as well, and the god allowed Demon Lord Zarek to crush the corruption of the kingdom and the church, and she would waive the royal marriage restrictions. Zarek accepted the pact, though he firmly refused to slaughter innocent humanity. Target only the traitorous nobles and priests serving Zeus, leaving common folk to live in peace. Moved by his honorable decree, the goddess granted her blessing ahead of time. She formally consecrated Astaria and Vashka as Zarek's rightful consorts, bringing jubilation to all. Yet now, fresh pressure fell onto Halden to restore the second holy blade, guaranteeing demon victory and sealing Zarek's expanding harem. Hades cast a subtle fertility blessing across the soil to nourish future harvests before departing with the pantheon. Once celestial conflict subsided, quiet return to the valley. Expressing his gratitude, Zarek gripped his restored sword and marched off to launch the final campaign. The Demon Lord vowed to return soon, even as Astaria and Vashka squabbled alongside his departing column. Recent arrivals at the homestead, including the mermaid women Rowena and Neva, were completely stunned to witness deity and demon kings dropping by like casual neighbors. Golden rice patties ripened rapidly under the divine blessing, far outpacing ordinary crops. Polishing the harvested grain into spotless white rice, the household prepared a grand feast. Initially, Maurice and Sylvain dismissed the raw grains as bland and unremarkable, yet a single bowl of steaming, perfectly cooked rice converted them instantly. Despite their earlier skepticism, neither could resist reaching for second helpings. Honoring Hephaestus, the deity who bestowed Halden's supreme crafting talent, the farmhands laid seasoned rice balls upon a simple wooden shrine. The ritual marked a quiet milestone, closing an era of struggle and opening a chapter of prosperity. Out of nowhere, the skeletal Lich King materialized, terrifying the gathered workers. He casually offered to summon Hephaestus directly, but Halden shut down the idea before chaos erupted, leaving daily farm life to reach unprecedented comfort. Simple meals of egg over rice soon evolved into crispy tonkatsu pork cutlets prepared from hunted monster meat. Lacking traditional savory sauce, Halden transformed the dish into katsudon, simmering crispy cutlets with eggs over warm rice. The meal proved a sensation, marking the settlement's rise from a crude camp into a thriving, self-contained estate. A crew of 50 goblins tended expansive fields, cultivating everything from juicy tomatoes to soybeans. Over in the vats, the mermaid women oversaw fermentation, brewing fresh batches of miso, soy sauce, and ale. Heavy construction and monster hunting fell to Grub's sturdy orc squads, while Pera, the demon seamstress, spun monster silk into fine clothing. Operations ran seamlessly until Sylvain, the ancient dragon who governs the local dungeon, conceived a new scheme. Manipulating the mana core as dungeon master, Sylvain could restructure the labyrinth's terrain and enemy encounters at will. She raised the dungeon's overall rank to force the spawn of high-tier beasts, seeking richer culinary delicacies and perhaps creatures capable of producing fresh milk. Following days of restructuring, Sylvain declared the mountain dungeon set to hard mode, prompting Halden, Maurice, and elite warriors from both mermaid and demon factions to step inside and claim whatever rare ingredients waited within. Crossing onto the threshold of the 5th floor, the expedition party found themselves staring out over a frozen wasteland. Exactly as anticipated. Ambient warmth vanished instantly, striking the skin like sub-zero water. Howling gales whipped thick drifts of snow across the desolate landscape. Freezing gusts set every member trembling, particularly Maurice and Syndra, who were clearly ill-equipped to handle such Arctic conditions. Grumbling over the extreme environment, several Vanguard fighters contemplated calling an immediate retreat. Though they had navigated spring, summer, and autumn biomes with ease, no one had packed thermal cloaks or heating gear. Before anyone turned around, Sylvain's cheerful voice echoed across the cavernous expanse. She proclaimed the frozen sector as the dungeon's ultimate trial, the Winter Realm. Heightening the stakes, she unveiled the territory's apex guardians, giant ice golems. Formed from high-density enchanted frost, these towering constructs repelled standard steel with ease. Colossal frost beasts emerged from deep snowdrifts, boxing in the unprepared party. Bitter frost sapped their stamina as the constructs advanced, but suddenly, the Hylochaon wolf pack, the beasts that pledged loyalty to Halden during their trek through the summer floor, bounded forward, driven by fierce allegiance despite the freezing chill. Weaving rapid circles around the towering constructs, the wolves drew enemy focus away from the frozen squad. Inspired by their pack's courage, Halden refused to freeze in place any longer. Gripping the holy sword as radiating warmth pulsed through its hilt, the saint stepped forward with one decisive slash. His blade unleashed a roaring arc of energy that did far more than split ice. The blast shattered the nearest ice golem into tiny frozen shards. Inspired by the strike, the orcs and goblins smashed the remaining golems with blunt clubs, while the wolves kept them occupied. Between the hero's divine blade and the party's coordinated attacks, the battle became a complete team effort. What had been a hellish winter zone quickly turned into a simple cleanup job. With the final golem destroyed, the path to the summit stood clear. The companions hiked up the final stretch of the mountain, and as they stepped onto the peak, the freezing wind suddenly died down, waiting at a cozy campsite were Sylvain the dragon and the no-life king teacher. Sylvain looked slightly sulky that her ultimate dungeon was cleared so easily, though she could not hide her impressed grin. The teacher offered a calm nod, as if expecting their victory all along. The perilous dungeon crawl ended up feeling more like a day at an amusement park. Reaching the finish line at last, the group waited to see what rewards Sylvain had prepared. The party had been ready to quit after the brutal summer zone, but Sylvain suddenly appeared in human form. Though meant to serve as the final boss waiting at the end, Sylvain had grown bored and decided to join the party instead. She sped the climb, building up hype for a special monster at the 5th station, mocking the direwolves for being weak compared to what lay ahead. Reaching the 5th station, the party entered a freezing winter wasteland. A massive 3-meter-tall bear stood alone, looking far more dangerous than any pack they had faced. The orc leaders, Grub and Grok, stepped up, but struggled against the beast's raw power. Seeing his companions in trouble, the master intervened. Drawing his holy sword and divine skills, the master felled the bear with a single diagonal slash. Though badly hurt, the bear remained alive, and the master took pity on the creature instead of finishing it. The master asked Maurice for medicine and personally tended to the bear's deep wound. Having no need for its meat or fur, the master saw no reason to let it suffer. Tending its injuries complete, the party moved forward, leaving the stunned bear behind. The party finally stood on the summit, a narrow peak surrounded by a sea of clouds. Just as the companions began celebrating the end of their climb, Sylvain dropped a bombshell. Conquering the dungeon required defeating her in battle. A massive silver dragon descended from the sky, a clone Sylvain created with her mana. Even holding a fraction of her power, the terrifying dragon unleashed a torrent of fire at the exhausted group. Before the master could react, a huge shadow leapt in front of the flames. The bear from earlier. The bear swiped at the fire, breaking the blast and roaring at the dragon to protect the man who saved its life. Despite the size difference, the bear fought with fierce pride and destroyed the dragon clone's core to win the battle. Standing victorious, the heroic bear approached the master and bowed. The master offered it a place at the farm, but the bear turned and walked away. Grub explained that the bear was simply too proud to stay behind. The beast wanted to travel alone to grow stronger, aiming to face the master as a worthy rival one day. The master respected that drive, naming the legendary beast Barrow before the group returned home to discuss the dungeon's future. Maurice and the others complained that the extreme weather and massive scale made harvesting monster materials miserable. Sylvain defended her design, explaining that distinct environments were necessary to spawn varied monsters. The master liked the environmental variety, but chose to pivot away from a simple hunting ground. Planning to use the climates to cultivate unique crops, the master praised Sylvain's layout and made her day. Meanwhile, a new face arrived at the farm. Solveig, an elite officer from the Demon Lord's army. Solveig used to serve as the right-hand woman to General Astaria, but her life took an unexpected turn when her commander ended up marrying the Demon Lord. Now assigned a new mission, Solveig lived on the farm to manage the secret teleportation portal connecting the demon realm to the master's territory. Though a top-tier warrior, her routine now centered on checking magical coordinates once a day and settling into quiet farm life. Solveig routinely checked the portal coordinates, wiped away the dust, and wrapped up her chores quickly. With the remainder of her day free, Solveig usually helped out around the estate. She stood ready for farming, hunting, or cleaning. Yet, she began feeling left behind. Her companion Para, another former demon officer, had already secured a vital role managing the farm's clothing production. Back when they first arrived, labor shortages made Solveig a hero for lending a hand everywhere. However, the Saint proved remarkably efficient at managing farm operations. The Saint systematically brought in mermaids, goblins, orcs, and even monsters. Goblins now handled the crops, orcs took care of heavy lifting, and mermaids ran the brewery. Solveig felt increasingly useless, trapped as a jack-of-all-trades who lacked a true specialty. The shift dealt a painful blow to the pride she had built in the Demon Lord's army. Her spirits sank even lower following a recent dungeon run where she contributed almost nothing. Solveig felt like the Saint had completely forgotten her name. Terrified of becoming useless on the farm, Solveig ran to Para for advice. Inside her private dressing room, Para sat buried under mounds of work. Solveig offered to assist, but Para shot her down for being too clumsy at tailoring. The seamstress even suggested she rejoin the demon army, stinging Solveig's pride even deeper. Before sending her away, Para mentioned that Halden had just constructed a massive kiln. Sensing a fresh opportunity, Solveig rushed straight to the saint's side. Halden explained his plan to craft proper pottery so nobody had to eat off leaves and wooden boards. Solveig begged to assist, and Halden welcomed her onto the project. Channeling his holy powers, Halden instantly transformed common dirt into smooth pottery clay. Solveig stepped in with her own magic to spin the potter's wheel automatically. Setting magical stones to power the wheel, Solveig pushed her spell a bit too far. Overeager to impress Halden, she accidentally spun the wheel at high speed. Wet clay exploded across the room, splashing them both in mud, and as they cleaned up, Solveig grew emotional. Solveig confessed her fear of getting thrown off the farm, asking if becoming Halden's wife was the only way to stay. Halden reassured her to relax, promising that nothing like that was required. Returning to the wheel together, the pair successfully shaped a simple clay plate. Though rough and resembling ancient pottery, the crude dish marked a solid start. Halden officially appointed Solveig to lead the whole pottery operation, leaving Solveig beaming with joy until a goblin burst into the room with urgent news. A gang of elven bandits had crossed the farm border, led by a notorious woman named Ilvena, notorious outlaws who had evaded imperial guards for weeks. The elves expected a quiet homestead to loot, but farm defenses were far tougher than expected. Farm guards captured the entire gang before a single sword was drawn, leaving Ilvena stunned. As an elite forest dweller, Ilvena believed no human could ever track her down. Bound on the ground, her second-in-command Torvek spoke up, trying to explain that this hidden settlement was anything but ordinary. Unknowingly, the gang had marched into a realm of high-level monsters, and a saint turning soil into gold. Fleeing across the frontier, Ilvena had led her crew deep into uncharted woods. For months they evaded both human troops and demon patrols, until the bandits stumbled across an immaculate, lush farm tucked away in the wilderness. Pristine crops filled the fields, glowing with near-magical vitality. Giving in to greed, the thieves began devouring every crop in sight. Ilvena tried keeping her crew focused, yet one bite of a fresh tomato shattered her restraint. Rich flavor burst across her tongue, easily the finest food she had ever sampled. Spotting a grand mansion among the fields, the gang resolved to raid the estate, assuming some wealthy aristocrat owned it. But a small dog blocked their path before they reached the steps. Younger bandits cooed at the adorable creature. Yet, Torvek, Ilvena's second-in-command who knew monster lore, sensed immediate danger. Far from a harmless pup, the creature was a hell's pursuer, a high-level beast that never loses prey. The hound suddenly let out a rhythmic bark, calling reinforcements to the front yard. Within moments, heavy footsteps echoed as rows of armed orcs and goblins encircled the elves. Ilvena prepared to force a breakthrough, assuming low-rank orcs would shatter easily, but she was completely wrong, as these beasts possessed terrifying combat power. Guard Captain Grub swatted incoming elven arrows aside like buzzing flies. Grub revealed his identity as a Legatus orc, a supreme warrior beyond anything the bandits had fought. To make matters worse, the captain warned that 9 equally powerful commanders patrolled the farm. Completely overwhelmed by such overwhelming power, the elven bandits dropped their weapons. Halden soon emerged from the main house to check on the commotion. Maurice and her fellow aides explained that the captured elves were famous outlaws targeting corrupt nobles. Grub demanded execution for the theft of farm produce, a harsh sentence backed by several villagers. The residents felt their labor demanded respect and insisted on stern punishment to deter future raids. Reluctant to spill blood, Halden viewed the thieves as honorable outlaws rather than ruthless killers. Refusing to execute the gang or deliver them to royal authorities, Halden proposed an unexpected alternative. Halden ordered the bandits to labor on the farm until their debt was paid, leaving Elrond bewildered. Elrond warned Halden that elves were master escape artists who could slip into the trees at any moment. Right on cue, a massive dragon named Sylvain swept low over the tree line, unleashing a fiery roar to clarify that any escape attempt would reduce the entire forest to ash. Trembling in terror, the bandits accepted that they were trapped in a sanctuary far beyond their league. Halden ignored the rising tension and asked the elves what practical skills they possessed. He wanted them to remain productive and content while working off their debt. He suggested starting with simple field chores like weeding and harvesting, but Ilvena bristled at the suggestion that her people were mere field hands. A strange problem soon emerged. As the elves proved useless at manual labor, agriculture made no sense to them, since they expected food to simply grow unassisted. They even refused to raise structures, claiming natural landscapes shouldn't be altered. Solveig, a demon worker on the farm, explained that elves were nomadic foragers who moved on whenever a forest ran dry. Solveig suggested handing them over to the demon kingdom, considering them useless labor. Then the elven leader, Ilvena, spotted a crude ceramic plate being crafted nearby. Ilvena casually remarks that a wood ash glaze would leave it smooth and durable. As it turned out, while elves despised farming, they excelled at high-end craftsmanship. They quickly showcased their talent, converting raw materials into fine pottery, tailored leatherware, and master-grade bows, even shaping glass containers for mermaid magic experiments. Solveig later admitted she had hoarded the pottery work, fearing these skilled elves would replace her. Guilt overwhelmed Solveig, bringing her to tears for trying to expel them just to preserve her standing. To settle the dispute, Halden officially put the elves in charge of the workshop. Ilvena and her second-in-command, Brissa, were simply relieved to secure a home. They had resorted to banditry only after human spells destroyed their homeland, draining its vitality. Upon discovering that the farm's leader, Saint Halden, was also a victim of otherworldly human magic, the elves felt an instant bond with him. Since elves are an all-female species that must mate with other races to sustain their line, the elves decided that Saint Halden would make an ideal partner. They began plotting ways to approach him, despite feeling intimidated by his formidable wife, the dragon Sylvain. Meanwhile, the farm reached another major milestone: brewing alcohol. Ravina, a skilled researcher, had been working tirelessly to produce a quality brew. Following endless trials with grain and hops, Ravina finally mastered a crisp, cold ale. Saint Halden was delighted, pulling Ravina into a celebratory embrace. Ravina suddenly grew emotional, anxious that completing her task meant she was no longer needed. Halden quickly reassured Ravana that this was merely step one, as they still needed to scale up production for the entire settlement. Overwhelmed with relief, Ravina squeezed Saint Halden with all her strength. Ravana pressed against Halden awkwardly, her soft body clinging close to his chest. Ravina pleaded hysterically, offering to share Halden's bed every night if she could stay forever, leaving Halden bewildered until Sylvain, who was casually sipping beer nearby, pointed out the obvious. Ravina was completely drunk. Ravina's face burned crimson after sampling her experimental brew a few too many times. Despite Ravina's drunken antics, the farm was operating at peak efficiency. Combining St. Halden's modern knowledge, orc construction strength, delicate elven artistry yielded flawless results across every project. Tasks that had stalled for months were suddenly nearing completion. One morning, an orc and an elf arrived together to display a massive shield forged from a monster turtle shell. The shell was naturally resilient and curved to deflect heavy blows, though such materials usually turned brittle once the beast perished. The elves solved this by applying sticky tree resin as a lacquer, binding every microfracture to form the sturdiest armor they had ever created. To demonstrate its strength, the pair suddenly struck at St. Halden, but the shield performed flawlessly, warding off sharp arrows and heavy swings without a mark. Just as the trial ended, Prince Kalen of the Mermaid tribe arrived for his regular visit. Still obsessed with sumo, Prince Kalen immediately challenged the farm's local fighters. Even though the farm's monsters had grown remarkably strong, Prince Kalen overpowered them all. Spying the new turtle shield, Prince Kalen praised its design, noting mermaids use similar gear to deflect underwater harpoons. St. Halden presented the shield as a gift, delighting Prince Kalen. Shortly after, Neva brought out the brewery's latest creation: rice bran fermented pickles. Prince Kalen happily munched a whole cucumber while holding his new turtle shield and talking sumo tactics. Halden realized Prince Kalen was gradually morphing into a kappa, the mythical river creature fond of sumo, shells, and cucumbers. Right before winter struck the farm without warning, a mild day turned overnight into a roaring blizzard that buried the settlement in deep snow. Fortunately, the elves had sensed the changing weather early, warning the workers to harvest crops before ruin struck. Unprepared for the sudden freeze, everyone huddled close together to stay warm. Maurice and Rovina clung tightly to St. Halden's sides, seeking whatever heat they could find. That made Ilvena the elf so jealous she pelted charcoal at them, demanding to join the huddle. Frosty weather couldn't stop the farm residents from having the time of their lives. A playful snowball fight between the goblins and elves quickly escalated into total war. Competitors invented wild moves, throwing double snowballs or punching rivals while holding fists full of ice. Over by the water, Grub the orc built a wooden boat for winter fishing, only for it to collapse and sink. Soaked to the skin in ice water, Grub simply paddled back to shore without missing a beat. Far from the snowy festivities at the farm, tension was mounting across the human domain. Inside his grand palace, King Genesis the 18th was bragging about imported delicacies when a guard burst in with grim news. A massive demon host had invaded the realm, leaving the clueless monarch scrambling in sheer terror. Worse still, the kingdom's top generals had all returned to their private estates. Without any military leaders present, The royal army was completely unprepared for battle. King Genesis could hardly process being abandoned by his lords when another crisis struck. An attendant delivered an even bigger bombshell. The legendary sacred barrier was gone. The magical shield that had safeguarded humanity for thousands of years lay completely shattered. Two formidable demon generals, Astaria and Vashka, were behind the destruction. Astaria and Vashka had drawn their heavy blades and smashed the barrier to splinters. Making matters worse, the Holy Church had long forgotten the spell required to repair it. As demon legions reached the capital gates with no defenders left, King Genesis accepted his fate. Showing rare courage, King Genesis offered his own life to the demon lord to spare his subjects. Miles away from the royal crisis, atmosphere at the farm remained peaceful and quiet. A howling winter blizzard swept through, but the residents quickly found ways to entertain themselves. The farm owner tested winter cultivation, burying potatoes and cabbage under deep snowbanks. Freezing preserved the vegetables and sweetened their flavor, though carved woodwork became the true seasonal highlight. Using thick timber, the farm owner carved a massive mortar and pestle for traditional mochi pounding. Mermaids, elves, and monsters gathered around the courtyard, eager to see what he was making. When the farm owner framed it as a contest, competitive beasts like grub grew instantly thrilled. While heavy mallets pounded steamed rice, the owner bravely flipped the hot dough between strikes. Near misses occurred when the owner had to warn grub not to crush his hands, but they persisted. The team succeeded, serving chewy hot rice cakes paired with rich, sweet red bean soup. Laughter and warm food filled the hall, helping everyone forget the sub-zero cold outdoors. When winter snow melted into spring, the farm owner realized a full year had passed since his arrival. Standing on the porch, the farm owner surveyed the impressive expansion of his homestead. A modest garden plot had transformed into 80 thriving crop fields, complete with irrigated rice paddies. The main residence now served as a lively home for his wife Maurice and their growing household. Monster allies had constructed tidy living quarters tailored to their specific needs. Elven residents built cozy log cabins, abandoning mud beds after seeing the others wearing soft pajamas. Step by step, the estate had grown into a fully self-sustaining micro-kingdom. Mermaid workers operated a brewery for miso and soy sauce, alongside a magically chilled food vault. Nearby, Rovina managed a winery, planning to distill strong spirits alongside her signature beer. Mountain dungeons yielded game and minerals, while fertile fields yielded harvests, securing a prosperous life. Reflecting on their yearly progress filled the farm owner with pride, yet his ambitions remained high. With spring blooming, the farm owner set his sights on planting orchards for wine production. To assist with the crops, actual earth spirits arrived, guided by a simple suggestion from Maurice. Since the spirits offered aid while goblin crews were swamped, Maurice proposed dividing daily labor efficiently. Earth spirits managed subtle tasks behind the scenes, taking care of weeding and pest control. Their work took place primarily at night or during dawn before residents stirred. This schedule prevented overlap, letting Grok's goblin team tackle heavy construction in daylight. When Grok finally understood the arrangement, weeks of nervous worry vanished into pure relief. Discovering that Earth spirits were secretly tending the soil gave Grok a quiet chuckle. For their part, the Earth spirits were thoroughly pleased with the new living arrangement. Initial fears about human contact vanished once farm residents welcomed the spirits with warm hospitality. Curious spirits began tagging along during work hours, observing daily farm techniques with fascination. The farm owner established one strict rule: no picking crops without asking permission first. After Sylvain's recent persimmon raid, setting clear boundary rules was a vital precaution. Day by day, the expanding settlement took on a vibrant life of its own. Goblin teams tilled fields, dungeon orchards blossomed, and earth spirits tended soil behind the scenes. Monsters and humans stood side by side, building a shared future on common ground. Though the communal bathhouse remained unbuilt, the owner simply delayed construction until next season. While Earth spirits had initially labored in secret field plots, new needs arose. Drawing on her royal background, Maurice recognized that the growing mansion required proper maintenance. Though these spirits resemble small children, they are fully mature adults who live to work. Eagerly taking over the chores, they loved the custom miniature outfits crafted by fashion-obsessed para. They took pride in their work, leaving the house spotless before vanishing into the soil each night. The only demand for their labor was payment in fresh butter. Unfortunately, the farm owned neither cows nor milk to churn. Maurice asked the dragon Sylvain for milk, assuming dragon milk would be a rare delicacy. Sylvain felt insulted by the request, particularly while standing in her human form. Proving them all wrong, Sylvain took flight and vanished for 6 whole days before returning with company. She brought a massive basket carrying horned, goat-like beast folk called satyrs, which looked like an abduction until the satyrs explained that Sylvain had actually rescued their tribe from total disaster. Grateful for their survival, they offered to relocate to the farm and share their famously delicious milk. Their rescue began when Sylvain reached the satyr settlement high in the rocky peaks. She discovered the tribe trapped on the cliffs and desperately clinging to survival. Unleashing her dragon strength, Sylvain cleared out the danger and saved every last beastman. Upon hearing she needed top-tier milk for her home, the satyr women eagerly agreed to serve such a powerful rescuer. Settling into their new life on the farm, the satyrs gave the homestead a steady milk supply, while the earth spirits moved one step closer to securing their beloved butter. Perched on sheer, dangerous cliffs, the satyr village remained unreachable to standard humans or demons, relying on goat-like agility for survival. Nestled high above the world, their natural fortress kept outside invaders at bay. Even steep mountain walls could not keep out a dragon. Although Sylvain landed near their village, the satyrs showed no fear toward her. Pema, one of the satyr sisters, revealed they were already panicking long before Sylvain arrived. Another dragon named Dorvath had invaded their domain a year prior. The cruel dragon demanded their greatest artifact, the golden goatskin, turning a simple trial into outright torture. Emperor Vaskar had set various trials for his offspring to determine his true heir. Tasked with stealing the skin, Dorvath chose to play the tyrant instead of taking it outright. He sealed their mountain passes, diverted their streams, and torched their feeding grounds. Dorvath wanted to watch the tribe starve until they begged for mercy. Just as the tribe reached their limit, Sylvain descended upon the village, seeking only milk for the saint rather than treasure. Finding the satyrs too stressed and famished to produce milk, Sylvain grew furious. Realizing that beating Dorvath would restore their peace and secure her milk, she took action. Sylvain challenged her dragon brother and utterly destroyed him in combat. To her, Dorvath was a coward who preyed on weak tribes because he feared true opponents. With the battle won, the satyrs hailed Sylvain as their ultimate savior. In repayment, Pema and 10 young satyr women volunteered to move to the farm and handle dairy production. These women possessed half-human, half-goat bodies, with curved horns, fluffy tails, and hooves. According to the No-Life King, who served as the farm's resident scholar, ancient magic created the satyrs as chimeras long ago, blending humans with animals. Despite their dark origins, these beast folk remained remarkably cheerful. Life on the farm grew livelier as Pema and her sisters established a bustling dairy workshop, producing high-grade cheese and butter, yielding milk richer than anything Halden had ever tasted. Delighted by the outcome, the earth spirits constantly hugged the satyr women in gratitude for the butter. Overjoyed with her new home, Pema offered her personal affection to Halden, who quickly and loudly rejected her advances, caught off guard by her bold nature. Far away within the Dragon Emperor's realm, a darker mood hung over the massive dimension built by Vaskar's overwhelming magic. Dorvath returned to the castle trembling, having failed his designated test. In Dragon Society, failure meant losing position, title, or life itself. Dorvath attempted to blame Sylvain, branding her a coward for meddling in his trial. Begging his father for another attempt, Dorvath found no sympathy from Emperor Vaskar. Vaskar noted that interference was encouraged, as unexpected chaos made the contest far more entertaining. To the Dragon Emperor, his children were mere pawns competing in a ruthless game. Having fallen to his sister, Dorvath lost all claim to the imperial throne. Casting his failed son aside, the colossal Emperor Dragon sat alone upon his throne, gazing over his realm like a mountain of armored scales, completely indifferent to his son's ruin. Emperor Vaskar possessed a terrifying ability to drain the magic and knowledge of other dragons to boost his own power. Executing this steal upon Dorvath, Vaskar reduced his proud son to a simple, mindless lizard. Without a shred of remorse, Vaskar banished the baseline reptile from his sight. Such fallen dragons typically roamed as lesser beasts, until someone put them down. Through ruthless dominance, Vaskar ensured every living dragon descended directly from his bloodline. He had slaughtered his own siblings centuries ago to guarantee his supreme position. Back at the farm, life has changed dramatically, as recent arrivals doubled the population. 20 elven thieves joined alongside earth spirits, satyr women, and other newcomers. Massive wolf-like beasts called hyper-icons now patrol the perimeter as guard dogs. Housing mermaids, orcs, and elves under one roof carried the risk of constant conflict. Inspection rounds began to ensure every faction coexisted peacefully, starting with the orcs and elves. Most people expected ancient rivalry, yet these two groups became inseparable companions. An elven craftsman named Phelan proudly demonstrated a new invention to his orc friend Verk. The creation was a bow axe, a wood-cutting tool fitted with a flexible, curved handle. Swinging the weapon at a log only caused the pliable handle to flex harmlessly. Despite the useless design, Verk offered encouraging words and pulled Phelan into a warm embrace. The orcs and elves were thriving, shifting the inspection focus to the earth spirits. These tiny miniature beings resembled doll-sized humanoids. The spirits handled mansion chores while eagerly donning maid outfits. A demon seamstress named Para crafted these clothes, taking her enthusiasm a step too far. Para poured all her energy into making every garment impossibly adorable. The seamstress even proposed stitching cat-eared maid uniforms for the elven warriors. Someone had to intervene before her wild designs spread across the compound. Orders were given directing Para to prioritize practical daily clothing for the residents. The earth spirits formed a close connection with the resident satyr community. Led by a woman named Pima, the satyrs managed the farm's dairy and butter production. Wrapping up evening chores, the spirits routinely gathered inside the satyr workshop. Pima rewarded each little worker with a plate of fresh butter, their favorite treat. Later, orcs, elves, and humans assembled together to enjoy cups of rich milk. Daily dairy rations kept the diverse crowd satisfied and maintained peace across the farm. Even the stern instructor, known as the No-Life King, harbored a hidden gentle side. An onlooker spotted the undead king quietly showering affection on Rusk, one of the guard dogs. Caught off guard, the No-Life King resumed his menacing persona, though his fondness for dogs was obvious. Attention then turned to Grub, the primary commander of the orc squad. Grub was a tireless worker who had stood by the farm since its founding days. Working alongside Goblin Chief Grok, Grub maintained daily operations like a trusted brother. Recently, the orc leader launched an ambitious new effort: wooden ship construction. Proximity to the coast inspired Grub to build vessels capable of harvesting oceanic resources. Harmony reigned across the territory, but rapid population growth demanded expanded food supplies. Facing extra mouths to feed, the orc squad resolved to overhaul their foraging operations. Grub calculated that venturing into deep offshore waters would yield massive catches. Deep-sea fishing promised yields far surpassing anything caught along the shoreline. Transitioning from terrestrial carpentry to naval architecture presented a steep challenge for the orcs. Technical guidance provided by Halden allowed the builders to master basic ship design. The crew learned to set structural keels for stability and rig canvas sails to catch sea breezes. Months of winter construction and testing gave way to early spring weather. Grub launched into open water alongside 10 stout warriors carrying bamboo rods and woven nets. Halden fretted over potential shipwrecks and illness, whereas Grub departed without hesitation. Mermaid Princess Maurice enchanted the hole to mark them as allies. Yet trouble struck swiftly. 3 days out, ocean breezes vanished completely, leaving the lost crew stranded. Grub held a magnetic compass in his hands, only to realize he lacks navigational training. Drifting across calm waters, the orc captain cast a line to keep morale high. While his crew hauled in fish, Grub caught nothing until a violent jerk strained his rod. Straining against heavy resistance, Grub pulled a live figure straight out of the water. Lying on the deck was a furious mermaid covered in obsidian scales named Nerith. Known as the Witch of the Abyss, Nerith instantly launched an attack against her captors. Uncorking a magical elixir, Nerith spawned writhing slime beasts across the deck. Hybrid octopus-human monstrosities surged forward to crush the standing crew. Trained directly under Halden, these battle-hardened orcs were far beyond ordinary fighters. With minimal effort, the orc crew swatted the slime beasts over the railings. Cornered, Nerith smashed a potent potion flask, summoning a leviathan 20 times her size. The colossal monster nearly capsized the vessel as it thrashed uncontrollably. Turning on its creator, the beast seized Nerith to devour her, prompting Grub to spring forward. Grub cleaved the leviathan apart with his battle axe and caught Nerith as she fell. Returning safely to shore brought widespread relief, where Maurice recognized Nerith on sight. Both mermaids belonged to the 6 Mad Witches, and despite Nerith's prickly nature, she settled in. Still, Nerith was undeniably impressed by the farm and Grub's quick rescue. Her mermaid tail made walking across dry land impossible, though. Maurice handed over a transformation elixir to split her tail into legs. Following an awkward shift that left Grub red-faced, Nerith toured the grounds. Seeing mutated beasts and nature spirits living side by side stunned her. A secret underwater laboratory was waiting back home. Yet, Nerith liked the farm enough to return for regular study, trading rare, deep-sea chemicals with Maurice for lodging. Now the homestead hosted a brilliant, bad-tempered sea witch, while the orc, well, Grub had unexpectedly stumbled into a romance. Wrapping up her work, Nerith, the famed alchemist, prepared to return to the ocean. Before shifting forms, she grabbed Grub, the farmhand who showed her around, and made Grub swear never to forget her. looking like a dramatic romance trope. That exchange proved ocean mermaids were not fragile creatures dying of heartbreak, but fierce pragmatists. Days later, Neva the Ice Witch mentioned missing Nerith while churning cheese with the satyrs. Neva was collaborating with Rovina, the plague witch obsessed with brewing microbes. Syndra the Hellfire Witch and Maurice joined them. Though when the farm owner jokingly called them the 6 Mad Witches, every single one snapped at him. The witches detested the title, calling it crude adolescent nonsense. They preferred simply the 6 Witches, a group of masters who had never met before reaching the farm. The grand title was merely a public ranking cooked up by rumor mongers. 5 of these grand alchemists now lived on the farm, while the 6th, the Dark Witch, remained elusive. Rumors claimed the Dark Witch was real, though skeptics dismissed her as a confused sea creature. To aid Rovina's microbiology experiments, Halden crafted a microscope using elven glass. Overjoyed by the tool, Rovina blurted out bizarre squeals and repeated declarations of love. Watching this display, Maurice casually reminded Halden to treat any new mistress with equal care. Halden gaped in shock as Maurice granted permission for a harem he had not even requested. Down in the abyss, the self-proclaimed 5 Orthodox witches toasted their good fortune. Believing Maurice and her rivals gone forever, the 5 planned to seize control of the sea's magic guild. While back on land, Satyr Milk unlocked a fresh culinary frontier, inspiring Halden to bake a strawberry cake. Lacking kitchen scales, Halden relied on a divine master skill to measure exact quantities. Hand-whisking dense batter quickly proved exhausting, however. Halden longed for a mechanical mixer, while earth spirits swarmed to swipe his butter reserves. As the cake emerged from the oven, farm residents swarmed the kitchen like ravenous ghouls. The sugary scent enticed everyone, sending even the ancient dragon Sylvain diving for a slice. Halden labored over the ovens until dusk, working his wrists to absolute numbness. Soon after, Demon Lord Zarek arrived at the gates alongside his royal consorts, Astaria and Vashka. Seeing her former monarch, Solveig burst into a dramatic, weeping salute. Surveying the settlement, Zarek marveled at how vast the agricultural compound had grown. The Demon Lord noted that the sheltered elven bandits were now cleared of charges, as the corrupt nobles they robbed had lost power. Zarek then dropped a devastating update. The human realm had fallen completely under his army. Zarek admitted the human monarch, though usually incompetent, showed surprising resolve at the end. The fallen king offered up his own head to secure amnesty for his surrendering subjects. Zarek honored that final noble stand, though Vashka mocked the king for displaying courage only in defeat. Though a mighty empire crumbled beyond the borders, daily life on the farm rolled peacefully along. With the assignment finalized, Solveig prepared to depart, leveraging her custom teleportation sigil anchored at the farm. That active anchor made Solveig the sole operative capable of instant travel. Solveig outlined her plan. The captive princess was held inside the fallen capital, so Solveig would infiltrate the ruined palace, extract the royal, and gate directly home. Days later, the portal flashed, and Solveig stepped out accompanied by a guest. Solveig guided a haggard, pale girl through the gate, Princess Lyriel. At 17, Princess Lyriel wore the hollow, broken gaze of a ruined sovereign rather than royalty. The visible swell of Lyriel's pregnant belly highlighted her vulnerable state. Farm residents gathered near the gate to greet the arrival after news of the kingdom's fall. Trembling with terror, Princess Lyriel anticipated severe torment or execution. Instead of dungeons or executioners, Lyriel found a tranquil haven of monster folk and humans living side by side, leaving her utterly bewildered. Back in the palace, protocol and royal exploitation defined her life. Here, titles meant nothing. Halden and the locals welcomed Lyriel simply as a weary guest needing shelter. Gradually, dread drained from Lyriel's eyes, as Zarek's sanctuary choice proved a blessing. While political chaos and war raged outside, the homestead stood as an untroubled sanctuary. Princess Lyriel spent her days walking in sunshine and eating wholesome farm meals, slowly recovering her strength. As her due date drew near, the mood on the farm shifted from simple curiosity to fierce protection. Everyone from the rugged orcs to the local spirits agreed that this princess and her unborn child were family now. The political threat the demon queens had feared was now just an expectant mother seeking a fresh start. Far away from the lingering shadows of her father's fallen throne, the massive bear held its ground, terrifying 50 armed priests despite their superior numbers. Covered in thick fur, the beast looked powerful enough to wipe them all out without breaking a sweat. Bishop Vosric, who had been acting so high and mighty, panicked instantly and ordered a full retreat. The priests scrambled backward, their moral arrogance vanishing the instant a genuine threat appeared. Yet the bear had not come simply to hunt. appearing instead to be searching for something. Moving deliberately, the beast approached the pile of supplies the priests had trampled into the mud. A local girl watching this felt her heart break seeing their winter food destroyed, but the bear merely sniffed the air as a new figure stepped out from the shadows behind it. A woman emerged with a calm yet razor-sharp gaze, wearing attire unfitting for a commoner or demon. This newcomer was Solveig, a high-ranking demon agent who had been traveling alongside the beast. She glanced at the destruction left by the priests before turning her attention to the shivering villager nearby. Solveig and her companion were actually scouting the region to oversee a smooth transition to the demon lord's reign, while Bishop Vosric, trying to save face, screamed at her, branding her a demon witch and demanding she back off in God's name. Solveig did not even blink, finding it utterly pathetic that these men who claimed holy authority were busy robbing their own people, while the demon forces reduced taxes and built schools. The priests attempted to charge her, confident they could overwhelm a lone woman and a bear. That proved a fatal mistake, as a single command from Solveig sent the bear charging forward. There was no need for bloodshed. The raw, physical force of the beast sent the priests flying. These men were never true warriors, merely bullies who fled the moment someone struck back. The bear systematically disarmed them, scattering their ranks and sending them fleeing into the forest without their plunder. With the garbage swept away, Solveig turned toward the locals, having no intention of causing them harm. She explained that the world was shifting, and the harsh reality of the human realm was, where the wealthy hoarded fortunes while the poor starved, was finally coming to an end. Presenting the village elder with an official protection seal, she placed the town under the direct care of the new regime. The young village girl and her family realized that every story they had been fed was a complete lie. The so-called monsters were shielding them from harm, while the holy saints had been draining them dry all along. As Solveig and her bear companions set off toward the teleportation circle to return home, a quiet peace settled over the village. The people were no longer merely struggling to survive. For the first time, they had a genuine future ahead. A squad of corrupt priests had tried using innocent villagers as human shields to escape the massive bear beast. They went as far as shoving the village elders, including the main character's father, directly into the bear's line of sight. Yet that cowardly plan backfired entirely, as the bear proved remarkably gentle with the helpless villagers, stepping over them with precision just to pursue the fleeing priests. Moving like a blur, the creature swatted the priests aside until the entire group was incapacitated, leaving only the head bishop. Bishop Vosric grabbed a young girl, pressing a dagger against her throat to force the bear back. The beast halted immediately to protect the child, but the brave girl refused to stay a helpless victim. She bit the bishop's hand with everything she had, making him shriek in agony as she darted away in the confusion, leaving. With the hostage clear, the bear finished off the bishop, and a few days later, demon troops arrived to clean up the area. The soldiers were astonished to find the priests bound and breathing, as the bear had merely knocked them unconscious. The troops spoke of rumors surrounding a holy bear that traveled the countryside, aiding isolated settlements. As it turned out, the beast had once been defeated by a saint, and was now training to redeem itself. The villagers felt nothing but deep gratitude to be alive, while back on the farm, life quietly moved on. Princess Lyriel, a former human noble, had been residing on the farm for months, proving herself surprisingly industrious. She remained convinced that a righteous saint would eventually arrive to rescue her from captivity, completely unaware that the humble farm owner was the very saint she awaited. To give her something of her own, the owner granted her a small patch of soil to cultivate. Lyriel chose to raise broad beans, pouring her entire heart and soul into tending the crop. Even when a flock of crows ruined part of her harvest, the princess refused to abandon her efforts. Gathering what little survived, she prepared a simple meal from her yield, and was so deeply moved by the flavor of her own hard labor that she vowed to stay on the farm forever. As the estate expanded, Halden realized that traversing the grounds on foot was consuming too much time. He needed a swifter mode of travel, so Solveig suggested installing teleportation magic, but Ilvena immediately rejected the proposal. She explained that establishing multiple teleportation points posed a massive security hazard, allowing enemies to bypass their defenses. With the property hoarding rare magic metals and high-grade elixirs, extreme caution was paramount. Sylvain volunteered to carry everyone in her dragon form, But she was far too lazy and unpredictable to act as a regular transport service. Ultimately, Halden decided the best course of action was acquiring dedicated mounts for everyone to ride. Halden began looking into acquiring horses, which were just as essential here as in his old world. The Baroness suggested requesting a few high-quality steeds from the Demon Lord as a favor. Just as plans for this new transport system began, Varg, the direwolf, stepped in. The massive beast trotted over and offered his back for riding. Halden warned everyone it was a bad idea, especially when heavy orcs tried to mount up. But the farm animals seemed bound and determined to help in their own ways. The second horse appeared ordinary at first glance, but something was clearly off. Nerith explained she had combined the horse's lineage with a giant spider monster. This creature could scale vertical walls and ceilings thanks to sticky pads on its hooves. While Zarek grew ecstatic, envisioning how this beast would revolutionize mountain warfare, Halden just felt frustrated, having no use for a wall-climbing steed. The Saint simply wanted simple transportation from point A to point B without clinging to ceilings. Next came the third creation, the high-power horse, fused with the traits of a massive land dragon. Built like an armored tank, it could drag a mountain, yet it looked more like a monster than livestock. Halden realized these reckless researchers cared only about power, completely forgetting a horse's actual purpose. Finally, Nerith revealed her fourth masterpiece, bringing silent awe to the entire crowd upon its arrival. It bore no heavy armor, spider legs, or dragon muscle. Instead, out stepped a sleek, majestic horse, whose coat shimmered like mother of pearl. It radiated speed and elegance, set apart by one striking feature: a magnificent pair of wings. By combining horse stock with a high-rank avian beast, they had bred a true Pegasus. For the first time during this experiment, Halden genuinely felt impressed. A flying mount served as the ultimate shortcut for farm operations. Bypassing roads and rivers entirely, one could simply soar above every obstacle. Zarek wept openly at the sight, overwhelmed by the creature's breathtaking beauty. Though reaching this point required a bizarre process, involving questionable breeding techniques with the Demon Lord's mount, it succeeded. The farm now possessed a fleet of magical horses that defied all standard logic. Halden kept the winged mounts for farm duties, while sending the armored and dragon-like beasts with Zarek where they could serve effectively in military campaigns. With transport settled, connections across the region flourished, even as neighboring settlements watched winged steeds cross the sky in absolute terror. Nerith then presented her next creation, a peculiar horse known as the Tricky Mount. This creature stood surprisingly small, resembling a pony far more than a war stallion, its body possessing a soft, rubbery texture derived from octopus monster traits. Rather than galloping, it bounced like a grasshopper and clung to steep walls with suckered hooves. Zarek immediately envisioned stealth assaults and ambush tactics, while Halden grew annoyed, wanting simple riding horses rather than a mutant circus act. Next came the third attempt, which Nerith claimed was tailored specifically for the heroes. Just then, Sylvain, the ancient dragon residing at the farm, stepped forward in human form. She had aided the research by contributing her own dragon bloodline, creating a true dragon horse. Though appearing like a prime stallion initially, an intense aura radiated from its frame. The beast even spoke telepathically into Halden's mind, reminding him that true authority requires no boastful display. When Halden mounted the beast, it launched forward with terrifying speed. It moved like lightning while keeping its rider remarkably secure. Seconds later, the steed leaped into the sky, galloping smoothly through thin air. Clinging to the mane, the terrified hero shouted for the beast to descend immediately. He complained that these magical steeds were excessive for basic travel, suggesting they buy standard horses from the kingdom instead. But as the three magical mounts gazed up at him with big, tear-filled eyes, guilt won out, and Halden agreed to keep them all. The dragon horse, callable only by Halden, received the name Skarn. The remaining mounts found ideal roles across the farm. The heavy armored beast went to Grub, while the bouncy, tricky horse went to the goblin chief. Later on, Halden spotted local elves riding perfectly ordinary wild horses caught in the forest. He realized he could have simply asked them from the beginning, avoiding all this chaos. Shortly after, the teacher, an ancient undead monarch living nearby, arrived with a dramatic announcement. He intended to summon a deity. Though summoning gods was deemed impossible and forbidden for worldly balance, the teacher insisted. He claimed divine messages had reached him directly from the heavens. Hades and Poseidon had requested summoning, and the ritual successfully brought both gods forth. While Hades, god of the underworld, was already a familiar sight, Poseidon made his first appearance. Poseidon stood tall and dignified, holding a trident with flowing silver hair. Every mermaid on the farm immediately bowed down to Halden. The gods had not descended for anything sacred. They came down over a petty argument. Hades insisted that the farm's bamboo shoot rice was extraordinary, but Poseidon refused to believe him and mocked land-grown food. To settle the bet, both deities ordered the hero to cook a fresh batch right on the spot. Halden found the whole dispute ridiculous, yet he agreed to prepare the meal so Hades could prove his point and end the rivalry. Life on the farm was thriving, with even earth spirits settling in as companions. Then Hades made a sudden demand. He wanted bamboo shoot rice immediately. Unfortunately, fresh bamboo shoots grew far away in a mountain dungeon, and preparing them from scratch would take days, sending the two gods into a petty squabble. Halden served them leftover green pea rice balls from lunch to calm the mood. Despite being cold leftovers, Poseidon was stunned by the flavor and declared it divine. Hades mocked him, pointing out that a sea god shouldn't obsess over soil-grown crops. Stung by the insult, Poseidon challenged Halden to create an overwhelming seafood dish. He promised a divine blessing if it succeeded, leaving Halden searching for something grander than plain grilled fish. While cleaning the crew's daily catch, Halden discovered several egg pods. That sparked an idea to make mentaiko, or spicy cod roe. He salted the roe and marinated it in chili until the eggs glowed like rubies. The remaining fish meat was ground and shaped into savory fish cakes. On the day of the feast, a whole pantheon of deities arrived, bringing along the families of Hades and Poseidon until the farm felt like a divine reunion. Princess Lyriel felt uneasy that Zeus had been excluded, but the other gods admitted they left Zeus behind because his arrogance ruined every gathering. Taking his first bite of the spicy cod roe, Poseidon stood speechless. The sharp spice, combined with the delicate texture, blew him away. He formally declared it the food of the gods and proclaimed Halden a saint. The gathering quickly transformed into a chaotic festival. Soon, the farm operated like an exclusive tavern for celestial beings. Plates of spicy roe omelets, simmered radish, and hot fish cakes flying out to every table. Halden spent hours working over the stoves to satisfy a dozen ravenous gods, while wine flowed freely. By the end of the grand feast, every divine guest was thoroughly stuffed. The farm's food stores were nearly drained before the eating finally stopped, while the no-life king, who had summoned them, watched silently as the gods ran the show. Hades and Poseidon promised generous rewards to cover the feast, assuring everyone they were nothing like Zeus, who usually ruined things through sheer greed, and they urged Halden to hide the farm from him. If Zeus discovered this paradise, he would claim it for himself and ruin everything. They even joked about joining forces to beat Zeus up if he ever showed his face. Since Halden had already received a masterwork tool from Hephaestus, the gods could not grant more weapons without upsetting cosmic balance. Instead, Hades promised bountiful harvests, while Poseidon guaranteed endless catches from the sea. Following their lead, the other deities distributed divine gifts to the rest of the crew. Amphitrite, Poseidon's wife, bestowed a special blessing of the sea upon Maurice. Meanwhile, the goddess Medusa granted a massive power boost to Neva, the Ice Witch. Even the orcs and elves gained new gifts, including evil detection and accelerated sleep healing. Every resident on the farm felt their strength and skills surge overnight. Up in the heavens, Zeus sulked on his throne like a spoiled child. Though ruler of the gods, he was utterly bored and widely disliked. Hermes graves with grim news. The human armies created by Zeus were losing ground to the demons. Zeus threw a tantrum, accused Hades of cheating, and vowed to march down and demand answers. Hermes simply sighed at his father's childish behavior, knowing full well why humanity had fallen behind. The hero's saintly presence and the divine forge tools from Hephaestus had shifted the war's balance. Hermes quietly resolved to help Hades and Poseidon keep the farm hidden, wanting only to prevent his father from causing more chaos. Back at the farm, Halden turned his attention to building a sewing machine for Para, the demon seamstress. As the community expanded, Para could no longer keep up with clothing demands by hand. Halden tried constructing a foot treadle model with rare metals, but mechanical design proved tricky. After several failed attempts, Halden decided to seek help from Hephaestus. He placed an offering of spicy cod roe rice balls on the shrine as a bribe. Delighted by the dish, the blacksmith god dropped a complete set of detailed blueprints straight from the heavens. With the schematics finally in hand, Halden stood ready to bring modern technology to the farm. Work moved rapidly as soon as the blueprint from Hephaestus arrived. While gods cannot grant humans more than a single gift, receiving a reward for a sacrifice is entirely allowed. Since the god of fire and smithing provided the design, construction on the world's first sewing machine officially began. Crafting a machine with millimeter precision normally proves exhausting, but Halden possessed a secret weapon. Activating his ultimate tool skill, Halden forged every gear perfectly round and every shaft completely straight. To slice through the toughest materials, Halden drew the holy sword Drivast. Even monometal, the hardest mineral on Earth, carved away as easily as soft graphite. The completed device was a foot-operated sewing machine made of monometal, set into a sturdy desk. Driven purely by muscle power, the apparatus required no electricity at all. Halden's construction crew, consisting of an orc carpenter and a skilled elf, had little idea what they were assembling. Yet Halden knew precisely who needed it. Para, the farm's clothier. Para looked pale as a ghost from the strain of stitching garments for nearly 200 people by hand. When Halden first displayed the machine, the exhausted seamstress called it a meaningless toy. The moment Halden threaded the needle and Para pressed the pedal, her eyes went wide. The mechanism hummed with a rapid, clattering rhythm, leaving behind perfect, even stitches in seconds. Para pressed the pedal while Halden guided the cloth. Maurice and Para held up a freshly stitched tunic, making gathered orcs and goblins cheer. Melting ice trickled from the mansion eaves as warm spring breezes swept the farm. Halden guided a monometal plow through soft dirt, while Grok led his goblins clearing debris. Pema carried pails of fresh milk across the yard as earth spirits danced around her hooves. The Yashima birds fluttered inside their coop, refusing Halden's grain. Hyperican guard dogs growled toward the northern fence, while Vard paced in agitation. Pema attempted to calm the restless satyrs as the beast kicked wooden stalls and stared north. Halden gathered earth spirits to guide them toward the north field for spring planting. The tiny earth spirits froze at the boundary line and dived headfirst into damp mud, refusing to enter the northern plot. Halden knelt to examine the damp earth, assuming frost chilled the soil. Maurice pointed out the restless livestock, but Halden shrugged it off. Grok led his goblin squad into the north field, while earth spirits huddled near the mansion. In the underworld, Hades sat on his obsidian throne as cold mist coiled at his feet. Hermes descended through a golden portal, stepping before Hades. Hermes unrolled a scroll and told Hades that Zeus had begun auditing mortal grain yields. Zeus noticed vast agricultural harvests disappearing from registers and suspected mortal interference. Hades frowned from his shadowy throne, aware that bountiful harvests on the farm caused it. Storm clouds gathered as Zeus angrily confronted Hades and Poseidon. Zeus slammed his scepter onto the floor, demanding why mortal fields yielded 10 times the crop. Hades smiled calmly and lied directly to his face, claiming missing grain consisted of ghostly offerings brought by dead souls. Zeus narrowed his eyes in suspicion, turning his fierce gaze toward Poseidon to demand an explanation for sea catches. Poseidon waved his trident and lied even worse, claiming giant leviathans swallowed half the harvest during ocean storms. Poseidon insisted the missing fish and crops sank into abyssal ocean trenches, where celestial scrying spells could not reach the harvest. Hermes stood in the shadows, biting his lip to stifle a laugh. Zeus grumbled but accepted the excuses, dismissing both deities. Exiting the divine palace, Hades and Poseidon traded relieved glances, while Hermes warned of Zeus. Evening shadows lengthened as a sudden biting wind blew from the peaks. Hyperican guard dogs barked at the northern boundary, drawing Grub and his patrol. Grub marched toward the fence, carrying his mono-metal battle axe. Halden walked with Maurice and Sylvain to investigate the commotion. The earth spirits huddled behind Maurice's boots, trembling and pointing at dark soil. Black smoke rose from a circle of frozen dirt where surrounding snow had melted. Burned into the hardened ground lay an intricate magical symbol, radiating heat. Sylvain stepped forward in human form, her silver eyes narrowing as she recognized the mark. Halden crouched down and hovered his hand over blackened dirt, feeling a harsh aura pulse. Maurice knelt beside Halden to examine the charred boundary mark, noting divine magic caused it. Sylvain identified the glowing rune as a tracking sigil used by sky gods to locate hidden domains. Grub gripped his axe tightly and scanned the tree line, positioning his orc warriors in a defensive arc around Halden. The earth spirits burrowed into the mud, terrified by divine energy emanating from the scorched mark. Halden drew Drivast from his belt, watching the holy sword pulse with light against the rune. Drivast hummed in Halden's grip, warning that a celestial watcher marked the farm boundary from the sky. Maurice drew a glass vial from her pouch, sprinkling glowing liquid onto the burned mark. The green potion sizzled and evaporated instantly upon touching the scorched rune, proving the mark held divine power. Sylvain looked up at the sky, warning Halden that the valley barrier could no longer conceal their location from Zeus. Grok and his goblin archers arrived at the boundary, fanning out along the perimeter fence with bows drawn and ready. Hypericon guard dogs ringed Halden, growling at the smoking dirt. Halden gazed back toward his mansion, sensing trouble ahead. Snow fell over the fields, but the burned mark on the boundary line glowed with heat. Halden gripped Dryvost beside Maurice and Sylvain, staring into the dark woods. A ragged figure stumbled through the northern fence line, collapsing onto the muddy earth. Halden, my grub, rushed across the field, finding an exhausted woman with dark scales. Maurice and Neva ran up to join Halden, staring at the shivering newcomer. Nerith pushed through the crowd and gasped in shock, recognizing the Dark Witch as her younger sister. Nerith dropped to her knees in the mud, cradling the Dark Witch. The Dark Witch gasped for air on the grass, having fled openly across the frontier line. Maurice questioned the Dark Witch on why she crossed the boundary without hiding. The Dark Witch rasped weakly that 5 Orthodox witches were hunting her across the realm. Dark clouds gathered along the northern horizon as distant magical beacons signaled the approaching Orthodox witches. Nerith held her sister's hands, inspecting dark burns on her arms. Syndra gripped her glass potion flasks tightly, scanning the distant tree line for any sign of the 5 Orthodox witches. The Dark Witch warned that Orthodox witches sought to execute her before Sanctuary. Neva stepped back in alarm, realizing the Orthodox witches pursued the Dark Witch because she knew the farm's coordinates. Maurice explained to Halden that the Orthodox witches aimed to eliminate the Dark Witch to protect Sea Guild authority. Grubb and his orc squad raised mono-metal axes, taking defensive positions around the perimeter. Sylvain landed in human form beside Halden, eyeing the Dark Witch. The Dark Witch collapsed onto her side in the grass, clutching her starved stomach while weeping from sheer exhaustion. Rovina stepped forward, carrying her alchemy kit, inspecting the Dark Witch's skin. Rovina backed away abruptly and insisted on immediate quarantine, citing unknown deep-sea blights on her sister's skin. Neva shouted in protest and demanded instant exile, warning that harboring a fugitive would bring the 5 Orthodox witches upon them. Syndra raised a fire potion flask, urging Halden to drive the Dark Witch off the property. Nerith placed her body over her sister, glaring furiously at Neva and Syndra. Stepping between them, Halden gently lowered Syndra's arm. Halden looked down at the starving Dark Witch, refusing to cast out a helpless guest. Turning toward Maurice, Halden requested a warm meal. Maurice hurried back to the main estate, returning with a steaming bowl of rice and savory meat stew. Halden knelt beside the Dark Witch and offered her the food, completely disregarding Rovina's demands for quarantine. The Dark Witch grabbed the wooden bowl, gulping down the hot rice and broth in seconds. Neva watched as the Dark Witch scraped the bowl clean and caught her breath. Rovina noted that the meal restored the Dark Witch's strength without spreading infection. Nerith wiped tears from her sister's cheek, asking why the Orthodox witches hunted her so. The Dark Witch lowered her gaze in shame before Halden. Sylvain folded her arms and demanded to know why the Dark Witch fled. The Dark Witch confessed that she had discovered the spatial coordinates of Halden's hidden farm. Neva gasped in dismay, recognizing how dangerous spatial coordinates were to the guild. The Dark Witch revealed that the Orthodox witches tried to imprison her for the coordinates. Syndra demanded why she fled to the surface instead of hiding in ocean trenches. The Dark Witch admitted she needed gold to escape assassins sent by Orthodox witches. Halden waited quietly, watching the Dark Witch prepare to speak the truth. Sobbing, the Dark Witch buried her face in her dirt-stained hands. The Dark Witch broke down completely, confessing she sold the farm's spatial coordinates to the church before fleeing. Maurice and Neva froze in horror, realizing the church held the key to their hidden paradise. Syndra tightened her grip on her potion flask, glaring at the Dark Witch. Nerith stared at her sister in heartbreak. Tears welled in her eyes. Halden looked toward the northern fence, remembering the charred mark burned into frozen soil. The Dark Witch wept into the grass, confessing the church priests paid her in gold before dispatching their hunters. Sylvain narrowed her silver eyes at the sky, sensing distant holy spells locking on. Grok and his goblin archers drew their bows, scanning the horizon as tension grew. Nerith knelt beside her sister, holding her close in comfort. Halden stood beside Maurice and Nerith at the boundary, facing the northern horizon as a cold wind blew across the fields. Armored human knights marched through the pass, carrying golden banners of the Holy Church. Vosric rode at the head of the vanguard, holding a holy scripture. 5 Orthodox witches hovered above the soldiers on swirling sea currents, guiding the vanguard along the trail. The human troops halted at the fence, staring at Halden's cultivated fields. Vosric pointed his staff toward the farm, declaring the domain an unholy nest. Grok and his goblin archers lined the perimeter fence, watching knights draw their swords. Grubb stood beside his orc squad, holding a mono-metal axe while facing human foot soldiers. Astaria and Para stepped out from the estate in diamond silk robes, proving the presence of high-ranking demons. Seeing the demon women, the human knights raised shields and chanted sacred incantations. Vosric raised his gilded holy scripture, confirming to the human army that demonic creatures inhabited the valley in violation of divine law. Halden and Maurice walked to the fence, facing the human army. Sylvain hovered overhead in human form, observing the army. Neva, Sindra, and Rovina stood near Halden, glaring at the witches. The 5 Orthodox witches called down from the sky, demanding the immediate surrender of the Dark Witch and the estate. Lyriel stepped forward from behind Halden, her belly visible. Lyriel raised her hand to command attention, invoking her royal bloodline. Lyriel urged Vosric to hold his troops and negotiate peace, explaining that the settlement offered shelter to all. The human knights lowered their weapons upon recognizing royal blood in her. Vosric sneered at Lyriel and dismissed her royal title, proclaiming that Holy Scripture superseded royal lineage. Vosric declared that Lyriel had corrupted her blood by residing among demons, rendering her status meaningless before Scripture. Lyriel shrank back in disbelief as the knights raised their spears. Halden placed a hand on Lyriel's shoulder, guiding her gently behind Grub. Maurice confronted Vosric, warning that attacking an estate would bring divine ruin on his army. The Orthodox witches chanted in unison, casting a shimmering barrier across the northern perimeter of the farm. Solveig drew her twin daggers, standing beside Astaria as the demon commanders prepared to defend their sanctuary. Vosric unrolled a heavy scroll, reading aloud ancient laws on monster nests. Vosric pointed out the mutated orcs, goblins, and demon generals, asserting that church law commanded their extermination. Halden drew Dryvast from its scabbard, causing the holy sword to radiate brilliant white light across the field. Human soldiers gasped in shock, recognizing the sacred blade's power. Vosric claimed the holy sword was stolen by demon sorcery, refusing Halden as a saint. Sindra raised a potion flask, ready to hurl flame at the witches over the fence. Nerith joined her sister near the fence, watching 5 Orthodox witches prepare sea spells. Vosric stepped onto a stone pedestal, holding a scripture high above the troops. Vosric proclaimed the farm anathema, casting excommunication on the valley. Dark thunder echoed as the decree of anathema settled over the ground. By declaring anathema, Vosric invoked his right to petition Zeus. Vosric knelt in the mud and raised his hands, praying for Zeus to strike down the demon nest. High above the clouds, skylight gathered as magic responded to Vosric's prayer. Halden looked up at the darkening sky, feeling upper god magic focusing on his farm. Sylvain narrowed her eyes at the storm, knowing Zeus would breach her concealed barrier. Maurice gripped Halden's sleeve in concern, sensing power gathering. Vosric smiled in arrogant triumph, confident that Zeus would send a destructive sign to obliterate the estate. The Orthodox witches maintained their barrier, blocking any escape while the Holy Army waited for the Sky God's answer. Grok and his goblin squad stood firm alongside Grub's orcs, weapons raised high. Astaria and Vashka drew their restored blades, standing shoulder to shoulder to protect Halden and his family. Lyriel watched from behind the shields, praying for her new home. Lightning flashed through black clouds above, illuminating the army and farm boundary. Vosric shouted his final prayer, demanding Zeus unleash wrath on the anathema ground. Halden stood at the front with Dryvast raised high, ready to meet whatever celestial sign descended from the sky. A blinding pillar of golden light pierced the dark storm clouds, descending straight toward the center of the farm. High above clouds, Zeus lounged on his golden throne, bored with affairs. Hearing Vosric's frantic prayer echo through the heavens, Zeus decided to answer a mortal petition to cure boredom. Zeus parted dark storm clouds, descending in golden lightning. Stepping onto the muddy road beside Vosric, Zeus glanced around the valley. Vosric bowed low in the dirt, pointing at the fence and urging Zeus to incinerate the nest. Expecting a filthy cavern of monsters, Zeus looked at the boundary. Zeus froze in astonishment, his eyes sweeping over paddies, orchards, and wooden mansions. Golden wheat swayed in the breeze, while Yashima birds clucked inside. Halden stood holding Dryvast with Maurice, Sylvain, and Lyriel. Seeing well-fed orcs and goblins farming beside humans, Zeus realized this domain was a paradise. Zeus raised a crackling bolt of lightning, preparing to demand an explanation for the hidden settlement. Dark shadows pooled near the boundary gate as mist rose. Hades emerged from the dark rift, stepping with his staff between Zeus and the gate entrance. Ocean waves burst from the earth as Poseidon materialized with his silver trident. Poseidon and Hades stood before the gate, forming a barrier to block the sky god. Vosric stared as two major deities shielded the anathema ground from divine wrath. Zeus narrowed his eyes at his brothers, realizing that Hades and Poseidon had lied to his face during their audience on Olympus. Hermes landed on a fence post, watching the confrontation with a nervous look. Hades warned Zeus to step back, insisting balance required leaving the estate untouched. Poseidon raised his trident, declaring the Ocean Guild protected the farm and its catches. Zeus chuckled arrogantly, lowering his thunderbolt with a scheming grin. Realizing the immense value of fertile fields and rich livestock, Zeus decided against destroying the domain. Zeus stepped past Vosric, slamming his golden staff onto the stone boundary mark. Zeus proclaimed that as supreme patron god of humanity, he officially claimed the entire farm as his property. Vosric and his armored knights cheered in triumph, believing the sky god confiscated the territory for them. Maurice gripped her alchemy vials, while Sylvain's eyes flickered with dragon flame. Hades sighed in frustration, knowing Zeus's legal decree as humanity's patron god bypassed divine rules. Poseidon grumbled in annoyance, realizing Zeus outmaneuvered them by claiming ownership over the farm. Zeus strutted toward the fence, declaring himself absolute master of the estate. Grok and Grub looked at Halden, awaiting orders. Halden lowered Dryvost into its scabbard, completely unbothered by Zeus seizing his land. Refusing to argue, Halden accepted Zeus as official landlord and offered a welcoming gesture. Pointing toward the grand mansion, Halden told Zeus that dinner was about to be served inside. Halden invited Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon to take their seats to sample roast pork and rice. Zeus blinked in surprise, taken aback by Halden's total lack of fear. Catching the aroma of garlic-seasoned boar meat wafting from the kitchen, Zeus felt his mouth water. Vosric reached out in panic, begging Zeus to smite the farm instead of dining. Zeus shoved Vosric aside, completely ignoring his desperate pleas. Hermes chuckled as Zeus eagerly unlatched the wooden gate and stepped onto the farm. Hades and Poseidon traded amused glances as they followed behind, knowing Zeus was walking into the exact same trap that ensnared them both. Maurice smiled at Halden, realizing her husband had diffused divine wrath with a simple invitation to eat. Sylvain relaxed her dragon posture, anticipating the massive feast inside the house. Lyriel let out a sigh of relief, watching the terrifying sky god walk beside Halden toward the house. Vosric and the human knights stood frozen at the boundary, abandoned by the deity they had summoned. The 5 orthodox witches dissolved their ocean barrier, watching Zeus march toward the hall. Grok and his goblin squad opened the doors, welcoming the celestial guests inside. Pema and the satyr women prepared fresh butter and cold milk for the table. Zeus followed Hades and Poseidon into the house, eyeing steaming dishes carried past him. Halden entered the kitchen, carrying fresh wooden bowls, ready to feed Zeus and his own family. Warm laughter and the rich scent of cooked food filled the hall as Zeus crossed the threshold of a mortal home. Zeus sat at the head of the oak dining table, staring suspiciously at his bowl of pork stew. Zeus sniffed the savory broth, expecting poison or hidden traps within. Maurice placed a basket of fresh wheat bread beside his elbow, offering a warm smile before leaving. Hades and Poseidon sat beside him, devouring large portions of roast meat without a trace of hesitation. Expecting Halden or the villagers to drop to their knees, Zeus waited in silence. Halden simply passed a jar of pickled radishes down the table, nodding to Zeus. Para approached Zeus carrying a roll of monster silk, observing his ragged robes with a critical eye. Para set up her sewing machine, threading the needle with practiced skill. Para stepped up to Zeus and pulled a tape around his shoulders without asking. Zeus glared at the seamstress, expecting her to tremble before his aura. Para told Zeus to keep his elbow still while noting his measurements. Zeus sat stunned as Para operated the pedal of her monometal sewing machine, stitching a diamond silk tunic before his eyes in seconds. Para draped the finished garment over Zeus's shoulders, adjusting the collar before heading to her shop. Grub sat across from Zeus, loudly crunching a roasted pig leg as juices dripped. Grub pointed a greasy bone at Zeus, arguing that boiled acorn mash made the finest boar feed. Zeus frowned and insisted that sacred bulls required golden barley to grow fat. Grub waved his hand dismissively, asserting that fancy barley made pigs lazy. Zeus flared his eyes with golden sparks, attempting to cow the massive orc into silence. Grub paid no attention to the divine sparks, taking another massive bite of pork and grunting happily. Hermes chuckled from the end of the table, delighted to see his father's intimidation fail. Tilda entered the dining hall carrying a heavy tray stacked with hot bread rolls. Tilda bumped her hip against Zeus's chair, completely failing to recognize the sky god. Tilda handed Zeus a warm roll, scolding him for sticking his legs into the aisle. Zeus held the warm bread in silence, watching the girl move down the bench to serve the goblins. Sylvain sat in human form, eating a pork cutlet beside Maurice. Lyriel passed juice to Solveig, laughing with the officers. Sindra and Rowena clinked stone mugs of fresh ale, celebrating another successful day in the kitchen. Earth spirits fluttered around, dropping butter onto warm rolls. ZEUS looked around the noisy hall, seeing orcs, goblins, mermaids, and humans sharing a meal together. ZEUS realized that no one in the room looked upon him with dread or groveling fear. For the first time in 1,000 long years, ZEUS sat among people who offered neither flattery nor fear. ZEUS took a bite of roast pork, his eyes widening in delight. Chewing thoughtfully, ZEUS realized that the food served in this simple farm manner surpassed Olympus banquets. Hades smirked, watching ZEUS empty his bowl so fast. Poseidon poked ZEUS's arm, mocking his earlier claims that land crops were worthless garbage. ZEUS wiped his mouth, growing restless beneath his calm exterior. Suspicion gnawed at ZEUS, since mortal kings never served guests without asking in return. ZEUS slammed his goblet, demanding to know what secret price Halden expected. ZEUS declared that no mortal king, general, or priest ever offered food and shelter without seeking power in return. The dining hall fell quiet as Maurice, Sylvain, and the captains looked toward the main table. Halden stood near the kettle, pouring a fresh cup of brew into a mug. Halden set the steaming cup before ZEUS, meeting his gaze without a hint of fear. Halden assured ZEUS that farm hospitality was freely given to peaceful guests. ZEUS narrowed his eyes, refusing to accept that such lavish generosity had zero conditions. ZEUS commanded Halden to name his price, whether it be royal crowns, endless gold, or victory in war. Halden smiled and shook his head, explaining that he had no interest in conquest or power. Pointing to the window, Halden gestured at the dry soil of the field. Moisture was desperately needed, as Halden noted young crops along the northern border required rain to sprout. Halden asked ZEUS for nothing more than a gentle rainstorm over the north field for crops. ZEUS stared at Halden in speechless shock, holding his tea mug as a gentle spring rain pattered soft against the window pane. ZEUS accepted the feast as a formal offering, preserving the rule that gods bestow rain on earth only for sacrifices. Thunder rumbled as ZEUS raised his hand, sending a gentle downpour over the newly plowed north field. Halden and Maurice watched from the porch as cool rain soaked into parched earth, nourishing seedlings. High above the tree line, 5 Orthodox witches channeled dark ocean magic into rain clouds. Black spores swirled as the Orthodox witches secretly infused toxic deep-sea bacteria into the storm. The poisoned rain fell upon the north field, seeping into the soil and spreading through drainage channels. Pema noticed her satyr goats coughing and drooping as they drank from water troughs. The Yashima birds inside the timber coop shuddered and collapsed onto their perches, infected by the corrupted water. Hypericon guard dogs whined in pain as dark spots appeared. Grub rushed to Halden in alarm, reporting that the farm livestock were falling ill. Rowena gathered samples of rainwater into glass vials and carried them straight to her workbench. Rowena adjusted her elven glass microscope, peering through to examine the liquid. Rowena identified swarms of microscopic sea bacteria multiplying in the rainwater. Having studied microscopic organisms for this crisis, Rowena instantly recognized the deep-sea plague in the groundwater. Rowena warned Halden and Maurice that the bacteria would eradicate every animal and crop on the farm. Halden listened as Rowena explained that standard healing potions could not purge bacteria from the soil. Maurice summoned Sylvain and Neva, organizing an immediate containment effort. Sylvain shifted into colossal dragon form, soaring above the boundary line with silver scales. Sylvain unleashed a towering torrent of white-hot dragon flame across the plot, incinerating infected crops and scorching the topsoil. Dragonfire purged the surface bacteria, turning ruined crops to ash. Maurice stepped forward, extending her arms toward the trenches. Channeling her mermaid alchemy, Maurice redirected contaminated groundwater into a current. Maurice swept toxic water out of drainage ditches and flushed it into the open ocean. Neva stepped onto steaming mud, raising her hands as an Arctic gale blew. Neva unleashed her ice magic, freezing the remaining infected slush into blocks of glacial ice. Deep frost locked toxic bacteria deep underground, preventing spread toward the mansion. Halden, Maurice, and Rowena surveyed the perimeter, confirming estate and livestock were saved. The farm held firm against attack, though the entire north field lay blackened and dead. Grok and his goblin squad stood at the inner fence, grateful the pastures remained uninfected. Pema and the satyr women tended the recovering livestock, applying herbal salves to them. Rovina smiled with relief as Yashima birds and dogs slowly regained strength. ZEUS stood on the porch holding his tea mug, observing the battle with glowing eyes. ZEUS realized that the 5 Orthodox witches had tampered with the rainstorm he gave to the farm. ZEUS narrowed his eyes in fierce wrath, recognizing that mortal witches dared lay hands on something created in his name. Hades and Poseidon stepped beside ZEUS, watching thunderbolts crackle around his right hand. ZEUS crushed his tea mug in anger, furious at the Orthodox witches. Hermes landed on a fence post, watching ZEUS glare toward the pass. Sylvain landed beside Halden in human form, wiping soot from her forehead. Maurice walked to Halden, resting her hand on his arm as clouds parted. Neva lowered her hands as ice settled over the field. Rovina capped her vials, assuring Halden that bacteria was contained. Grubb and his orc squad gripped mono-metal axes, standing guard along the boundary. Lyriel watched from the doorway, holding her pregnant belly against a wooden post. Astaria and Vashka drew restored blades, ready to hunt Orthodox witches. ZEUS raised his golden staff toward the sky, vowing retribution against those who corrupted it. Hades smirked at Poseidon, noting that Orthodox witches had foolishly provoked the sky deity. Halden looked out over his scorched property, determined to rebuild the North Field in spring. Maurice held Halden's hand tightly, standing side by side with her husband amidst the quiet post-battle silence. The spring breeze carried away lingering smells of ozone and smoke, leaving the estate safe. ZEUS held out his palm beneath the rain and watched the water blacken on his skin, fouled by other hands. Dark dragon clouds rolled over the mountains as Vaskar exploited the breached boundary. Vaskar descended from the sky in dragon form, landing heavily on the scorched North Field. Halden and Maurice rushed to the perimeter, watching the massive dragon lord crush the frozen soil beneath his claws. Sylvain stepped forward in her human form, her silver eyes narrowing as she faced her tyrannical father. Vaskar declared in a roaring voice that Sylvain remained his personal property, demanding her immediate return to his realm. Vaskar claimed that all dragons belonged to his bloodline as property, just as he claimed Dorvath before stripping his magic. Sylvain refused to return, standing beside Halden, Maurice, and defenders. Vaskar flared his dark dragon aura, threatening to incinerate the entire estate if Sylvain disobeyed his command. Halden drew Dryvast from its scabbard, stepping in front of Sylvain to shield her from the oppressive dragon pressure. ZEUS, Hades, and Poseidon watched from the porch, curious to see how the farmhands handled the Dragon Lord. Grubb and his orc squad raised their mono-metal axes, taking up battle positions alongside Grok's goblin archers. A small green lizard scampered out from the kitchen porch, trotting casually toward the northern boundary fence. Halden had been feeding the mindless reptile fresh meat scraps for months, entirely unaware of its true identity. The small lizard was actually Dorvath, whom Vaskar had stripped of power and banished as a baseline reptile. Dorvath crawled across the scorched dirt, looking up at the colossal dragon lord looming over the farm. Vaskar glanced down at the tiny reptile in disgust, recognizing his disgraced son Dorvath in his pitiful lizard form. Vaskar mocked Dorvath for wallowing in the mud, sneering at his baseline existence among common mortals. Dorvath stared at Vaskar, his dull eyes flickering with a spark of old memory. Vaskar offered to restore Dorvath's dragon magic if he helped drag Sylvain back to the Imperial Castle. Maurice watched nervously as Dorvath stood between the dragon and the residence. Sylvain called out, warning her brother against Vaskar. Halden knelt beside the small lizard, offering a gentle hand, just as he did during their daily feeding routine. Dorvath remembered the warm meals, soft bedding, and sanctuary that Halden provided, without demanding any power in return. Dorvath turned away from Vaskar's glowing dragon core, explicitly rejecting the offer to reclaim his lost power. Choosing to remain a simple baseline reptile, Dorvath refused to accept Vaskar's ruthless dragon magic. Dorvath planted his claws into the dirt, standing between Vaskar and the boundary. Vaskar roared in disbelief as his mindless son defied him, unleashing heat across the fence. Dorvath held his ground, shielding Halden and Sylvain with his body. Halden placed a hand over Dorvath, moved by the small lizard's loyalty. Sylvain smiled at Dorvath, proud her brother stood against their father. ZEUS chuckled, enjoying the spectacle of a tiny lizard standing up to a dragon. Hades and Poseidon watched attentively, noting that genuine bonds on the farm outweighed imperial authority. Vaskar raised his claw to strike, furious his property refused command. Halden raised Dryvast high, ready to defend Dorvath and Sylvain. Maurice and Rovina readied combat vials, preparing a volley of corrosive potions. Neva and Sindra stepped up to the line, casting ice and fire shields over the border. Grubb and his orcs slammed heavy axes down, letting out a battle cry. Grok and his goblin archers drew bowstrings tight, aiming at Vaskar's glowing eyes. Astaria and Vashka drew their restored holy blades, standing shoulder to shoulder at the boundary fence. Sylvain shifted into dragon posture, her silver scale shimmering beside Halden. Vaskar hesitated in astonishment as he looked upon the united front of gods, demon lords, mermaid witches, and monsters standing together. Dorvath hissed at Vaskar, reaffirming his choice to protect his home as a lizard. Vaskar realized taking Sylvain by force meant war against the entire sanctuary. Halden warned Vaskar that those threatening his farm found no mercy. Vaskar sneered at Halden and Dorvath, beating wings to lift into the sky. Vaskar retreated over northern peaks, leaving the farm grounds in peace. Dorvath turned to Halden, happily flicking his tongue as he waited for a meat treat. Halden knelt in the churned soil and let Dorvath climb onto his forearm, then carried him back toward the mansion. Sylvain and Maurice walked beside Halden, laughing as Dorvath rested in his hands. Dorvath curled around the porch rail beside Halden, while the last of the dragon clouds thinned out over the northern peaks. Vaskar ripped a spatial rift across the sky above the ridge. Vaskar summoned the remaining brother swords to destroy the farm using proxy warriors. 5 glowing holy blades descended through the rift, floating beside mercenary commanders. Halden stepped onto the field, Dravost radiating white light. Drivist hummed with resonance, calling out to her brother blades. Halvorn glided beside Halden, eager to face his kin. X-Waste hovered beside Maurice, challenging incoming brother swords. The mercenary commanders charged across the fence, wielding brother blades. Halden met the lead commander's strike, Dravost locking hilts with her sister blade. Halvorn clashed with 2 brother swords, parrying lethal strikes to shield the perimeter. X-Waste unleashed Sacred Flame, disarming a warrior and driving back invaders. A dark portal opened behind the boundary line as Zarek marched onto the battlefield at the head of a legion. Zarek brought his demon army to the farm, not for conquest, but to repay his debt to Halden. Astaria stepped to the front of the combined host in diamond silk, taking full command of the allied forces. Asteria raised her restored holy blade high, issuing tactical orders to human knights, orc warriors, and demon battalions along the fence. Human soldiers who surrendered after the capital fell lined up beside Grubb's orcs and Zarek's demon guards. Astaria led the front, commanding humans, orcs, and demons in a disciplined line. Grubb and his orc squad swung heavy monometal axes, shattering ranks alongside demon spearmen. Grok and his goblin archers rained arrows onto the invaders, while human archers provided covering fire. Sylvain soared overhead in dragon form, breathing silver fire to block mercenaries' retreat. Maurice and Rovena hurled corrosive vials, dissolving mercenary shields and dark curses. Neva and Syndra combined frost and fire spells, freezing enemy feet. Halden pressed forward with Dravost, disarming the third brother's sword. Drivast absorbed the aura of her fallen brother blade, purifying its energy. Halvorn struck down the remaining armed mercenaries, shattering their weapons against his edge. Asteria and Vashka charged the broken vanguard, securing the field alongside Zarek. The mercenary commanders dropped weapons, yielding to Astaria's legion. High above, Vaskar looked down from his dimensional castle in shock and disbelief. Vaskar watched his brother swords fall and his proxy army crumble before the united forces. For the first time in his existence, absolute doubt pierced Vaskar's mind as certainty shattered. The dimensional castle over the peaks shuddered violently as Vaskar's magic faltered. Because Vaskar's overwhelming magic and absolute certainty held the dimension together, the fortress began to crack and crumble. Tremors ripped through stone halls as Vaskar stumbled across his crumbling throne room. Vaskar roared in frustration, trying desperately to stabilize the realm with dragon energy. Massive chunks of floating stone broke away from castle walls, crashing down into the void. Vaskar reached toward the sky, but his aura disintegrated as his domain collapsed. The dimensional castle dissolved into mana fragments, vanishing completely from the northern sky. Vaskar plunged into the bottomless abyss with his crumbling palace, undone by the collapse of his own certainty and pride. The spatial rift closed above the peaks, restoring clear blue skies. Halden lowered Dravost into her scabbard, looking at peaceful fields and defenders. Drivast and Halvorn hummed in satisfaction, resting beside X-Waste after saving Halden. Zarek walked over to Halden and offered a deep salute. Proud his legion fulfilled their debt. Astaria stood beside Zarek, sheathing her sword, while human and demon soldiers cheered in victory. Maurice and Sylvain joined Halden at the fence, smiling as residents celebrated the outcome. Lyriel stepped onto the porch with Pema and Tilda, sighing with relief as safety returned to the valley. Dorvath scampered across the grass, catching a fly near Halden's boots. Halden scooped up the lizard, gently patting Dorvath as Grub and Grok led the troops back to the mansion. The earth spirits emerged from the soil, waving miniature banners while satyr women carried fresh jugs of milk. Warm sunlight bathed the thriving crops and wooden homes as human, demon, and monster allies gathered at the tables. Astaria raised her restored sword over crowded tables, and the cheer that answered came from human, orc, and demon throats. Halden guided a mono-metal plow across the north field, turning black soil in the spring sun. Grub and his orcs cleared charred stones from furrows, preparing land for planting. Grok led his goblin crew in sowing seeds, while earth spirits danced. Vosrik unclasped his cloak and marched toward the northern pass. Several young human priests laid down their holy symbols and picked up spades to work the fields. Halden welcomed former priests to the crew, handing them work gloves and shirts. Xeric and Astaria offered Lyriel a carriage back to the capital to reclaim her throne. Lyriel shook her head with a smile, refusing the crown to remain a farmer in the valley. Lyriel walked back to her garden patch, tending bean plants. Zeus unlatched the courtyard gate every evening, walking awkwardly into the mansion like a neighbor. Grub passed a platter of roasted pork past Zeus, offering no bow. Tilda set a bowl of hot rice stew before Zeus, telling him to move his elbow. Zeus grumbled, yet adjusted his seat and picked up his chopsticks to eat. Hades and Poseidon sat across from Zeus, teasing him as a farm neighbor. Hermes leaned against the wooden post, chuckling at the sight of the supreme sky god passing pickled radishes down the bench. Rovina and Neva emerged from the underground cellar with a bottle. Rovina proudly presented the first bottle of homemade wine distilled from sweet orchard fruit Halden had planted. Halden took the glass bottle with a smile, recalling how he dreamed of cultivating rich wine orchards. Maurice set out crystal goblets along the table for all gathered guests. Halden popped the cork, pouring purple wine into every glass. Zeus raised his goblet beside Hades and Poseidon, marveling at the aroma of the sweet liquid. Xeric and Astaria clinked glasses with Vashka, celebrating peace across the realms. Sylvain sat in human form beside Maurice, eagerly gulping her sweet wine before asking for a second. Grub and Grok toasted with heavy mono-metal mugs, sharing laughter with former human priests who tilled the soil. Pema and her satyr sisters poured milk into cups, while earth spirits ate butter biscuits. Dorvath sat on a stool near Halden's feet, flicking his tongue as he waited for a treat. Lyriel took a sip of the fresh wine, smiling warmly. Halden looked across the crowded dining hall, seeing celestial gods, demon sovereigns, dragons, orcs, and satyrs sharing a single table. Halden raised his goblet to toast his friends, content with the paradise he had built in the wilderness. Peta sat beside Solveig at the table, adjusting her diamond silk sleeves while sipping wine. Syndra and Rovina filled their mugs again, laughing as Neva tried to hide her face. Kalen arrived from the shore with fresh ocean fish, pulling up a chair nearby. Halden passed a platter of warm mochi cakes to Lyriel with a smile. The former human priests worked alongside Grub's orcs all morning, earning their seats through labor. Vosrik's departure left the church divided, but those remaining on the farm found peace in the soil. Zeus reached across the bench to grab another slice of pork, forgetting his throne. Hades laughed as Poseidon challenged Zeus to a drinking contest, pouring wine into crystal goblets. Sylvain rested her head on Maurice's shoulder, satisfied with the feast prepared by Halden. The earth spirits clapped as Pema brought out a fresh satyr cheese wheel. Dorvath scampered onto Halden's knee, accepting roasted boar meat from his fingers. Xeric rested his hand over Astaria's, reflecting on how their refuge saved them. Vashka smiled beside Asteria, enjoying the warm atmosphere of the grand hall without any rivalry. Maurice leaned close to Halden, resting her hand in his as laughter echoed. Lyriel looked out the window at the plowed north field, knowing her future was on this land. Zeus took a deep drink of fruit wine, admitting to himself that Halden's farm surpassed Mount Olympus. Hermes filled his cup, enjoying the sight of Zeus living among mortals without conflict. The evening breeze blew softly through the open windows, carrying the sweet scent of blooming orchard flowers into the room. Sunlight gave way to twilight as the valley residents celebrated their victory together. Halden took a sip of his homemade wine, savoring the flavor of fruit he nurtured from dirt. Surrounded by gods, demons, dragons, orcs, satyrs, and family, Halden smiled as the feast continued late into the night.